You know, I'm going to tell everyone. Hello.
Hello, everybody. We're live. If you're listening recorded, this is real life, what it's like trying to get creatives onto a podcast. The short version is...
No. A creative onto a podcast.
Sorry, a creative onto a podcast. Carlos is here. We're wondering where Laurence is. Laurence, if you're watching this live, you're on the wrong side of the screen. You're meant to be on this screen. So Laurence is going to join at some point. So I'm going to chat to Carlos first, which is kind of cool. I mean, we have 3 hours. It's all good fun. So, you know, and
45 minutes of me.
The juicy stuff is like usually a bit towards the end. So Laurence will probably jump in. I want to read something first by way of introduction. I read it. It was the blurb that you gave Sarah to put up with this podcast. And the reason I want to read this particular bit out is it not only explains who you are and what you do, but it very succinctly and eloquently talks about something that I have been talking about in my community and trying to get a handle on how we measure. And what you say about when you work with people is it starts with what success looks like for us individually. They believe that when you get clear on what people want in their lives, we can build our businesses around it. Most entrepreneurs do the opposite. They fall into the trap of fitting their happiness into the margins of life. Ooh. Which often gets squeezed. Anyone notice listening to this that you don't have any room left to be happy because you're so freaking busy? The business becomes the priority over well-being. Many just swap the rat race of the corporate world for the hustle of entrepreneurship. Listen up, people. Carlos and Laurence know what you've been doing. They get caught on another hamster wheel, working all the hours and not seeing the rewards, or putting everyone else before yourself, whether that's clients, employees, or investors. Thankfully, there is another way. One where you make money, where the way you make money aligns with your vision, values, and needs. I feel like that's the biggest introduction. Like that is, everyone else is talking about do more, be more, have more. Carlos and Laurence are going, maybe you've tried that. Maybe it's not working. Maybe you'd like to come over to the light side. Welcome, Carlos. Magic.
Thank you.
What do you say about that? Like, it's brilliant, eloquent, talks into what I think a lot of people listening to this will go, shit, there's another way. I didn't know. Like, I think there's a lot of people when they hear that will go, yeah, that's what I'm dealing with. I've got clients, I'm busy, I've got money, and my life's really fucking hard. And you start the opposite way around. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's hard though. Or it was hard at the beginning, when you're surrounded by everyone who does think like that, or you're surrounded, or you're immersed in a belief system that this is the way.
Yeah.
And you're brought up with that belief system that this is the way.
Yeah.
It can be quite difficult to try something different.
Yeah. Did you guys find this by doing it the other way and going, man, this does not work, and then finding the new way? Or did you already kind of have an inkling of this from the beginning? Like, how did you figure this stuff?
I will speak for myself.
Yeah.
And maybe I can talk a little bit to how Laurence might tell the story. Yes, I would say my mindset was very much on work hard, and you'll get your rewards. And it helped a lot. Did it help a lot in school? There's a lot of stories out there of entrepreneurs who were dyslexic or didn't have a good time at school and found it really difficult, and that, and they made their success, and that's how, and they fought hard and they found their way. I had a really good time at school. I actually did really, really well at school. I enjoyed it. I didn't work that hard, though I knew I was supposed to work hard.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, it was relatively a breeze, but I had that mentality, which I inherited from my father, of it's up to you, and it's about hard work. Yeah. And so there was a real belief around really using my time well. Don't waste your time. Use your time well. Always be learning, doing, creating. Well, not even creating, just doing. And so I definitely got onto the path of doing, or the hamster wheel of doing, and always trying to get better, always trying to learn, while at the same time not really feeling it, and also not really knowing what the direction was, which meant I took a very eclectic, weird path through work. But there was always something telling me that something was missing, and that was from a very early age. Something like I wasn't clear about what it is I wanted, and there was things that people told me that I should want, rich, famous, successful, powerful, and so I put those up as targets, but never really believed in them. And I think that the feature for me was then I didn't necessarily feel like I had a very strong direction, and ultimately I think wanting to enjoy whatever I did was the key thing. Felt the pull to make money, but at the same time, if it got too stressful and too hard to a certain level, I repelled. Oh yeah, I was kind of pushed myself away from it. And it was a real interesting tension, because on one hand it's like, no, you need to work hard, and on the other hand it's like, this could be easier. I don't want this stress. So I would say I was grinding the cogs for a long time, doing well, getting stuff done, doing well at school, got a PhD, ended up going to web design because I didn't know what else to do, became a director of an agency, then decided that being in that kind of, at that level, being a director, trying to run a company with other people, I found it difficult, didn't enjoy politics. That's when Laurence and I started working together. And Laurence was more in that space of like not wanting to have stress in his life. It was very much how can this be easy? I was very much about how can we push things, how can we make things happen. And so I think it was along that journey working with Laurence, and then trying to work out what is success in this agency that we're building about. And it was very much around doing work we loved with clients we enjoyed working with, and being in an environment that was beneficial to that. It just gave us creative energy. But I was still like, oh, where are we going? What is it going to do? How big is it going to be? Well, it felt like it needed to be big, but I wasn't sure what big meant to me. And it got to a point, and this is where I think I started to shift, was when we started the Happy Startup School. And it was a point where, all right, what do we do with this business? What does it mean to grow an agency? And most of the time it meant like growing a headcount, splitting it up into, I think the fashion in the day was like, you get to a certain size, then you split it up, and then you have another office and split, and then you start having offices all over the place. Rather than one big, massive business, you had lots of little, tiny, agile businesses. Didn't really appeal. Both myself and Laurence weren't great at being managers, and I think because we enjoyed doing the work rather than managing other people. And so, there was a choice there. Do we do this thing in the Happy Startup School, which had been born from this awareness that we do work because it makes us happy. That's one of the key reasons for doing it. But also when we were working with entrepreneurs and helping them build their businesses, building their platforms, not having that answer, them not being able to give us an answer about what's in it for them. Not just about the money and the size of the business, but what are they getting out of it, and why do they care? That realize actually we need to see more people, or we think more people should think like this. What is it about this thing that lights us up as well as does some good in the world and makes some money?
I like how you put and make some money last. Like that order is just brilliant, and it's so reverse to what we're told. Yeah,
and I think that's it, because there are very clear ways making money in the world, making lots of money in the world. They're very
Yeah.
very well-defined structures, financial structures that allow us to make money. It's just how do we fit our lives into that? And most of the time, I think it's because of this kind of industrial aged mentality of something process driven that can be scaled and that can be grown and that manages to dominate a market and what, you know, all of that stuff. That mechanistic view of business then squashes out the kind of more messy, human, organic, less I was going to say reliable part of the equation.
I've just had Laurence has just messaged. He said he had it in at 10:30 because there was confusion over the time. So he's coming. He's coming at 10:30. We're all good.
Okay, good. Yeah. Even though he did reply to the email and said I can make it at 10.
Well, you know. Come on, it's all good. I get to chat to you on my own. It's all good. Perfect.
Organic.
Imperfection.
Yeah. Well, this is it. This is the whole thing around there's process, structure, and which is helpful to coordinate people. Yeah. And then there's life.
Yeah. And allowing and not fighting like that. Like
exactly.
This is a very good example of like not fighting it shouldn't be this way. It's like, okay, this is now like what we're dealing with within that structure. Laurence joins in 10 minutes. It's all good. And there's a freedom to that of having that yin and the yang, both.
And for me, there's also personally there's a curiosity in terms of like, why am I annoyed by this? What is it in me? Rather than what is it about Laurence?
Yes,
who is creating some resistance, which I think is again part of this whole journey around how do we design businesses that take into account us as individual flawed people. That isn't just about build it and scale it.
And do you get resistance from people, or is your message, I mean, your message is very powerful, like your output marketing, quote unquote, is very powerful about how you work. So I'm guessing that puts people off who don't want to look. And the ingrained, like, do more, be more, have more is so, it's everywhere. It's like the water that a fish swims in, not knowing it's there. Do you get resistance from your clients when you're working with them and they're kind of wanting like the do more bit without answering the what's going to make you happy?
Yes and no. So if I talk to people who then come to Summercamp, do Vision 2020, join our community, they come because they want to drink from the Kool-Aid. They really they get the vibe. They really believe in it.
Yeah.
It's when there's some kind of level of existential threat of, am I going to make any money? Mainly it's, am I going to make any money? There's this thing like this fear of connected to just paying the mortgage, paying the rent, and maybe having people that depend on you, whether they're kids or partners. And so that's when this resistance comes up, because how do I pursue this quite emergent, organic, me-centered way of doing work when other people depend on me?
Yeah, and I've got bills to pay.
And I've got bills to pay.
Yeah.
And there's a way to pay bills, which is get a job, get a salary, and pay the bills. So that's where the resistance comes in. But when they find some flow, when they see, all right, actually I can make money this way, and also maybe part of a longer journey start to release themselves from this fear of scarcity, and maybe they start to build up some level of resilience to the roller coaster, then it's less of an issue. But I think it's always there because of the systems we live in, and we have to use money to make ourselves feel safe.
Yeah, I like that resilience to the roller coaster, because trying not to go on the roller coaster is basically impossible. So, that's
you don't even get on the roller coaster. You get born. You're born.
You're born on the roller coaster.
It's whether you open your eyes or close your eyes.
Yeah. We in our house. So Owen is forever on a mission. He buys property as well, my husband, and he's been on a mission to buy a skip company. He loves like machines and dirt and mud and skips and all this kind of opposite stuff to what I like. I like going to summer camp and humans and people and stuff. And we joked literally just yesterday that we went through this 4-month skip roller coaster of a purchase of quite a big company that fell through literally like the day before it was all meant to complete. And we'd gone through this like just insane, like it's happening, it's not happening, it's happening, it's not happening. That fell through a few weeks ago, and literally last night I went, all aboard for the skip purchase roller coaster. We're leaving tomorrow because the next company has appeared. He started the negotiations again. But in some ways, because I've been through the last 4 months, I'm like, it's fine, I've got this. I know what's going to happen. There's going to be all this like high expectation. Then no, it's not going to, like all of that. And that I can go at it with some humor this time, because it was very new, like company acquisition, albeit has similarities to property acquisition. It's a different beast of like due diligence and just what there's a substantial number of employees and machinery. There's a lot of stuff involved and a moving part of a business. And that roller coaster analogy is just so good. And it's like actually going on that big one means that this one now is like, okay, we can do this. We've done it. Like this is the second ride on the same roller coaster. And it I feel like this is slightly forced resilience, but it's building resilience nonetheless.
Well, I think on the whole forced resilience bit, I think we only build resilience when we realize we can take the pain. And unless you're a masochist, I don't think you just choose pain outright. You go for something that you want, and you realize there's obstacles in the way. And if you want it enough, you try and break through those obstacles. And you realize you don't necessarily break your hand every single time you try and punch through the wall. So I think there's something around going for something and it not working is a process of, you just learn all the things that you need to learn for the next time round, which then makes it less anxiety inducing because you have a better lay of the land. And I think the habituation to the low of something not working, I think is part of the resilience bit. It's like, okay, I know this bit, and I know this might not work, but maybe it'll work somewhere down the line. I don't know, because I think this is part of, for me, in a sense, your first business. It's best that your first business doesn't work.
Yeah,
because
I'd agree with that.
Most of the time, that's just luck.
Yeah.
As opposed to your second, third, or fourth business.
I've got joint venture groups whose one specifically that I'm thinking of right now. Shout out to 103S, whose first property deal was like this dream. It's like the unicorn poo that they write about in books or that used to sell courses about how easy and simple it was. So that was the first one, and then the second. Then they did two. And it was just fucking chaos, but they were like, what's happening? The first one wasn't like this. And it was such a shock because the first one had gone smoothly. Everything had lined up. There were no problems. It was all good. So they didn't learn anything. So then when, it was like a false sense of security going into the next one, that was just everything that could go wrong went wrong. And it hurt more because the first one went so well. So it's for sure.
I think this is what this touches on for me is programs that sell success, whether that's marketing, sales, business, design, whatever.
Financial freedom, whatever. Yeah.
Well, you sell knowledge. What you always acquire knowledge, but you don't necessarily guarantee. Like, we can't guarantee that someone is going to build a business, that aligns to who they really are, because they've got to find out. There's so many factors involved. What you'll learn is things to think about when you're going along that journey, and you'll learn from other people's mistakes, but they are different paths to yours. Shit happens. This whole thing about, I don't know, there's lots of stories I used to see about serial entrepreneurs, like success after success after success, and it's like, then it just like puts so much pressure on everyone else to say, oh, if I didn't succeed with the second one, then there's something wrong with me, as opposed to there's an element of luck in this, and circumstance, as well as where we are personally, that affects whether we're going to do well or not.
Yeah, and where we're starting from, right? I had this conversation with my mission masterminders on Monday. I said, if you don't deal with where you're starting from, and you're comparing yourself to, for example, like in this case, it would be a serial entrepreneur. It's like they might come from a family of serial entrepreneurs, and then so they're starting from knowledge, resource, money being normal in their family. I'm going to add Laurence to the stage. Laurence is in the house. Good morning, Laurence. Well, good morning again.
Hey, both.
We've already hung out this morning in Like-Hearted Leaders.
Yeah, so, I'm fashionably late.
It's good. You've given us this like beautiful storyline about structure, fluidity, creatives. Like we've totally weaved this in as like a live example of awesomeness. So it was perfect. It was like
organic entrepreneurship.
It's almost like we staged it.
Exactly. Always agile. Going with the flow.
Going with the flow, like water. I remember my mum saying that to me. She was like, stay fluid because rigid is too flexible. Rigid is too solid. I was like, oh man, I want to be like, I thought I was flexible. She's like, you can snap that. I'll be fluid like water. So here we are being fluid like water. Carlos and I are talking about entrepreneurship, clients, business, you guys' story. So yeah. And the dance of, we started off talking about how I love that you guys talk about what people want and what's their happiness spot, and then working out money later, which is, I think, one of the main reasons why I think you guys are rock stars. Because you do the opposite to what everyone thinks they should do, and then it works and magic happens. So we were talking along those lines.
Makes it sound so easy.
You guys do kind of make it look easy, I'm not going to lie. Like I came into summer camp, after you've been doing it for a decade. So I was watching, I was like watching you. So for those that are listening, summer camp is the event that changed my life, that doesn't promise to change your life, which in itself is refreshing because it's so underassuming. Like, oh, we just do this summer camp thing, and you come along and there's some workshops and some talks. And I went along and went, whoa, and had existential crisis and transformation, and I cried a lot, and it was kind of weird, but like coming home, but I didn't know anyone there, and it did all this stuff, and it was the gift that kept on giving through the year. It's now my favorite event of the year because I've been to 2, and I'm like, can't wait till September. And yet you guys just kind of like, yeah, we just do a summer camp. And yet you have tents and marquees and a field kit. Like for everyone listening, it's in a freaking field for 3 days, and they feed us 3 meals a day, plus snacks, plus endless hot drinks. There's tents, marquees, people everywhere, humans having existential crises. And then Laurence does Kung Fu sunrise yoga at 6 a.m. Just like,
I think that's Carlos.
That's just how we roll. Carlos, sorry. And
I can try.
It's magic. Yeah, it could be fun. And what you guys create is magic. And yes, you do make it look easy. And I'm sure it's, your overnight success has taken you like 40 years of friendship to create, right?
Exactly.
It's that old cliche.
Yeah.
Let's go there. Let's talk about summer camp. I've got a question for you. You gave a little badge out 2 years ago at summer camp that said business hippie. And I loved it. And shout out to Kevin Birch, who's been on this podcast, a very good friend of mine and a confidence coach, and helps parents and children with all kinds of issues. He's got a real problem with the word hippie, because I'm like, I'm a hippie. And he goes, you're not a fucking hippie. You live in a mini mansion and you've got a property portfolio. Hippies don't do that shit. And I go, you need to look up the definition of hippie, because actually we're kind of like changing things, and we believe in peace and love for the whole planet. And I don't think that's a bad thing to aim for. And I want to know what you guys say about what a business hippie is, because it's like, it almost feels like those two words shouldn't be together, but you've managed to create an event that personifies that. So what is it about hippie as a term and business that you guys, how have you done that? Like, what do you say that is for people who go, no, hippies are crusty, smelly people with long hair and no purpose, which I don't think they are, but you know.
Well, I think the other
what do you
aspect
say
to that
to
is
Kevin?
what is an entrepreneur? Because I think if you tell people that you're this is the moment, if anyone's listening, Carlos.
I was going to say, if you're listening or
reveals
watching, Carlos has just revealed his long hair.
Yes, in true hippie style. But he didn't look like that when we started, can I just say? So this is the evolution of Carlos through the hippie stages.
Literally turned him into a hippie.
Now he's full hippie. And I've gone the other way. I used to be a hippie.
You just got to go dreads now, Carlos, and you'll be all in.
Well, I guess I used to love going to festivals, so I think I was always a hippie. Really, I always felt like I was the lover, not a fighter. So I used to love just hanging out in a field with people around music, typically. But I think more than anything, just having that time and space with people. And then we started a business, and then I think I'm right in saying we didn't really feel like we fitted in traditional business circles, networking events. When we moved to Brighton,
about to say, did you go networking with everyone in their suits?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think everyone's been on this journey, I'm sure, at some point where they think they have to go networking with a big N, and you have to hustle the room. We went to, the one I remember is a speed networking event in Brighton that will live long in the memory for all the wrong reasons. So I think for me, it is about the oxymoron. It is this idea that they're two polar opposites almost. You can't be a business owner and be someone who loves people and the planet. You can't be a hippie if you love business. And so I think it's the marrying of these two, really, which again sparks a curiosity in people, and people just either poo-poo it or they get curious and want to learn more. So it's a filter, but hopefully a helpful filter.
Yeah. There's something Go on, Carlos.
I was going to say, I quite like the definition of a hippie, a person of unconventional appearance, typically having long hair, associated with a subculture, involving a rejection of conventional values and the taking of hallucinogenic drugs.
P.S.
Getting there towards the end bit, but it hits all the spots. Hits all the, what we're trying to do here is there is a culture of business, and we're trying to create a subculture of business. And it's trying to break conventions. And it's trying to do things, and also we're not trying to look like business people, although we are trying to create businesses. And this is I think I would love us to be able to communicate better, because I think people think, oh, happy startup, what is it? It's just, sitting in the field, smoking reefers. I don't know, whatever it is. Well, this kind of idealistic place. But if you think about in terms of business hippie, and I think you're going against convention, basically. That's what we're trying to do. Like Laurence said, we went to these events, didn't enjoy it. What can we do differently? And who is around there who, vibes with this idea of what it means for us to do business? And I think it's less about doing business. It's about what do we do to make ourselves happy and pay the rent and maybe do something good.
Yeah.
I think it's something there about just also not worrying too much about what other people think. So hippies were almost misfits. They sort of took themselves out of traditional society to just follow their own path, which was more authentic to them, and rallied against the current status quo, I think. So there's something about just being comfortable with your own values, your own beliefs, and just the way you want to show up, and not feeling like you need to be a kind of ruthless, hard-nosed business owner, because that's what the archetype is, if you want to be successful, you've got to walk over everyone, you've got to just be ruthless, and you've got to strive, because it's all about the competition, and you've got to keep your ideas close. And like Carlos said, everything that we've tried to do is almost just challenge every common myth about business. And so why does that exist? Why do we have to protect our ideas? We used to, when we worked as an agency, be told to sign an NDA the first time we meet a client before we'd even talk to them. They're like, can you just sign this? Because I don't want you to steal my idea. Don't want anyone to steal my idea. And this whole narrative of protection and
fear.
it's your turf, and there's fear. There's a lot of fear in business, I think. So I think that's one thing we tried to challenge is, what if you challenge that fear of there's not enough to go around?
Yes, and it does. It speaks into that, doesn't it? It speaks into that. There's not enough to go round. Resources are finite. Couldn't possibly collaborate with my competitors, quote unquote. They're all like out to get my clients type stuff. Whereas actually, usually works to collaborate.
The question for me that I remember talking to a guy called Paul Jarvis, who wrote a book, Company of One. And one of the questions that he poses in that book is, what is enough? And I think in business, that's where the scarcity mindset comes in, because you don't know what enough is for yourself. And enough, for a lot of people is market share, dominant market share. I need to be the dominant player in this market. And so then, of course, then you don't want other people to get ahead of you, because your metric is domination, as opposed to what is it for me? How much do I need to actually have a joyful life, meaningful life, happy life? And then that provokes the question: if I want to know how much I need to have a happy, joyful life, what is happy and joyful? And unless you answer those two questions, then I have no idea how much money I need. And which means I don't know how big my business needs to be.
It's huge, and yet people avoid it. I spent quite a lot of time wondering whether my book was the wrong way round, because the first 9 chapters are kind of asking that question, right? It's all about people's lives. It's nothing to do with money. And it was really, this pressure is so strong that I was like questioning that I'd done it that way, even though I knew that's the way to do it. Each year I do the next money mastermind course and go, oh, do I need to do the money bit first? Because that's kind of why people came. And it's, it's so invasive, even when, we're all in this conversation going, we know that that's the question that has to be answered. I still second guess myself and go, oh gosh, is it, do I really want to get people to answer that? It's like, and even people listening to this, like, don't just listen to this and go, oh yeah, I conceptually get that idea. It's like, no, answer the question that Carlos has just said. Like, what's enough? What's going to make you happy? God, it saves a lot of work in the long run for most people, I would have thought.
Or you just ignore all advice and do it your way, and then maybe then start to listen because you realized it didn't work as you thought it would. I think of when we were running our agency, so they didn't come to us wanting to build a happy business. They just came with us wanting to build a website or build a product. And so in some ways, the thing we had to sell to them was why are you curious about me and my story? Why are you curious about the why behind the business? And it had to be about, we want to communicate this to others. We want to get people to engage with your product. We want people to follow you. How are you going to do that? You're going to do that by sharing a bit about yourself and your bigger sort of story, bigger mission. And so people got that. But then over time, that questioning became unhelpful because we start to unravel. Like, is this the thing you should be doing? Maybe you shouldn't be building this product. What if this product doesn't work? And then we talk ourselves out of a project because they start to question things that they weren't ready to question. So I think it needs to be at the right time with these things. Otherwise, you'll just be like, no, I'm on this trajectory. I just want to do this thing, whether it's make money or I just want to build this business. And so any coaching questions don't necessarily help if they're at the wrong time.
I just had a revelation there, just thinking about that, how we ran, or how we worked with our clients as an agency. And I've always been telling the story of like, oh, we could build a better product, and then we could build, guarantee you better success if we know your story and understand the whys, because we can then make the better decisions about the business. And I realized it's nothing to do with that. It was actually, if I'm going to invest my time and energy in you, even if you're paying me, if I'm going to spend my time working on something, I need to understand it. I need to believe it. I need to want to do it, as opposed to, all right, let's take some money and run. And so asking those questions, well, I remember saying, oh, because it's good for the product design process. So that actually, what I realized was more about, like, if I want to, because I would invest a lot of time in some clients because I wanted to do the best work. But if I didn't believe in them, then that would, if it succeeded or not, then that would feel like a total lost cause. So as opposed to, if I believe in something, even if it's going to be successful or not, even if it isn't successful, I should say, if I've enjoyed the journey, I felt I've done something meaningful because I've contributed to someone's process, then it feels less of a loss if it doesn't succeed. Because like we were saying before, you're never going to guarantee success, no matter how good you are in designing an app.
Yeah.
I think also you understand their decision making, even if you don't agree with it. I think that's the other thing for me, is at least having more context. I think the thing I hated, and I think we both got to the point where people just giving you a thing to build and not really expecting or wanting you to question it in any way. I don't think anyone likes that. Just do this. Don't question.
Yeah.
So
You are
all
no
your
longer
years
a
of
human.
experience-
You're a robot that will do for me what I need.
Yeah. And they've brought you in for a reason, hopefully as an expert, to help them navigate a problem. And so I think that's where I found it challenging, was not being able to add your own input into it. And so hence the questioning, which sometimes went well, sometimes tripped up.
But in a way, you kind of want that trip up earlier, though, right? But you like that questioning sort of helps you align or not align.
That's the thing. I don't think, I was having a conversation around this kind of similar topic this morning on LHL. It's like some people don't want to be tripped up. They're not buying you to be tripped up. They're buying you, like Laurence said, to do a job. Do this. And our lives would have been so much easier if it was just cookie cutter, did WordPress websites or whatever the fuck was the fad at the time. Bam, bam, bam. You want this? We'll build it. We know it takes 2 hours. We'll charge you 20 grand. Done. Best business ever. Or SEO, like me. If we were in the SEO business at the time when no one understood what it was. So yeah, we will get you to the top of Google. Just use these obscure words. You'll be there. Pay us 20 grand. Perfect. But that wasn't us. That wasn't something that we were interested in. And this, I think, ties to why we're doing the Happy Startup School. It's like there was a success of a business model there, but it wasn't the business model that suited how we wanted to work. And the business side of things is, if you try and sell stuff to people that don't actually want it or aren't ready for it, then again, that's not sustainable. So there's an element of first understanding what lights you up. This is tying it back. What did we enjoy, and then finding people who need that.
Yeah. And as you're talking, it's made me realize I would say the Happy Startup School wouldn't exist without the frustration of not being heard in those conversations, particularly for me. Like all my early blogs were essentially rants, but in a kind of hopefully friendly tone.
Yeah, interesting.
Just to share, like, actually, this is what I think is important. You think this is important. This is what we believe is the future. And so that's how we found our people, was not necessarily converting people to believe us. It was more finding people who wanted
saying
this.
Which is massive in sales, right? It's much easier.
Yeah. But like Carlos said, it's like
are looking for what you have rather than getting people who don't know they need it, that they should have it. And that's like pushing treacle up a hill. And
we have this all the time. There's a few people in my current on our program who, the problem they experience at work, and this is often the thing that they want to solve, and the easiest place they think to go is where the pain is the greatest. So in corporates, for example, the toxic cultures, and they want to sort of help fix those, but often it's the hardest place to start because they just can't see the problem, or they're just not ready. And it's easier to go where people are looking for solutions rather than those who are maybe going to be the last people to pick up a new innovation or a new idea. But it's frustrating because you're like, I can change this thing. I know I've got the answer.
Yeah. Changing a big system or disrupting and starting with something new. That's huge, isn't it?
I think there's the mission and there's the money. And if you're really on a mission to change the system, I really feel that you need to be in it for the long game. Yeah. Don't expect, particularly if it's a system that a lot of people are bought into. Yeah. And talking and looping it back to the beginning, if it's a system where work hard, get reward. The more you work, the more reward. If that's the mindset, if that's the belief, the story that's in their head, telling them like, effortless success, that's where it's at. It's like, you just now threatened 20 years of my existence by telling me I did it wrong.
Yeah, right?
It's a whole new story.
We forget that when we challenge people's way of doing something. We're basically going, oh yeah, you just wasted the last 2 decades, sunshine, being miserable and unhappy and working really hard. You didn't have to do that. No one wants to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, the other aspect to it too, as we found, is it challenges your whole world, like not just your story or your belief system. It challenges your friends, your network, your life choices.
So
I think that, going back to summer camp, there's one guy I remember in particular who came to one of our early events, and he didn't even tell his wife he was coming because it was a big thing for him. And I think he had such big revelations that he got a bit scared, and we didn't see him again. And I don't think he really made any changes as a result of it, because I think he kind of opened the door to what I think he felt like was a more nourishing way of living and thinking about work and business and life. But then the fallout from it would have been too great, for him. So
it's like it's too much, isn't it? To see something that's possible over here and then realize we're here, and in between the two is a mountain that feels impossible to climb. Like that. That's really tough for people.
Yeah. I think it's easy if you're in your 20s and you haven't got commitments, family, work, you're not invested. But I think if you're a few years further along and you're further down the road with a lot of things, then to unravel
entrenched.
It takes a lot of courage.
No, I'd also say when you're in your 20s, you think you know it all. You're not going to listen to some old fogey telling you what to do, or this is how life works, or you know what, you're going to regret this in 20 years. And
I'd say they're rare. The 20-year-olds that are ready for that message, they're rare. There's very few 20-year-olds come into my business because they're just like, money, retirement, whatever.
I think you need to have had, what do they call it, the quarter life crisis. So there's a few.
Or some version of responsibility.
But they're outliers.
Like, shit, I've got to pay a mortgage, or I've just had a kid and now I've got to actually think about other people and or someone that's died, or like there needs to be a big wake up. And most people that come to me, they're after 30. I've had a couple of like shining stars who've come through Money Mastermind at 18. I was like, oh my god, doing this work at 18, you guys are just gonna fly. But they're so rare to be like ready and open for that. And it's almost like there's a dance, isn't there, between wisdom that's hard won via pain and screw ups versus like kind of being open early and being an early adopter. You can't, there's a wisdom gained from doing it the wrong way. I don't think you were quite on, Laurence, when Carlos and I were talking about, when people have a fail, they learn so much more. And then
Isn't that the only way you gain wisdom though?
Probably.
Everyone's got to have a shit job. Everyone's got to have a shit job at one time in their life, I personally think.
Yeah, like trying to save, we've all got kids, right? It's like, wouldn't we love to like have them avoid the pain? But actually I wouldn't, because it was the pain that got so much growth and the wisdom. This idea of like, oh, don't learn from your mistakes, learn from someone else's mistakes, read this story. It doesn't do it in the same way.
When it comes to passing a maths exam, definitely learn from other people's mistakes.
Sure.
But when it comes to like getting to the end of your life unscathed, not necessarily sure that's the best advice. And I think there's something around old souls. I definitely agree that there are people who are born who just are, there's just a knowing, maybe a centering. But I do believe you don't get wisdom without work, essentially, unless you've done it.
Yeah, that's interesting what you said about the old soul. I have a similar thing, and people have said to me, oh, you're an old soul. And then I read this article about childhood trauma and how it forces you to grow up quickly, and then people think you have an old soul, but actually you've just been through shit that made you grow up quicker. So now I'm like, oh fuck, I prefer the old
Should I be proud of that or just sad about it?
Yeah, now I'm like, oh shit, which is it?
That for me is wisdom.
Yeah, right.
Because
I
still
don't hard one.
It's not necessarily chosen wisdom.
Yeah,
not really.
Well, I don't think wisdom is ever chosen. This is what I'm trying to make the point. It's like wisdom is, for me, it isn't something you learn. It isn't something you can necessarily tell people. You can tell people knowledge, but you can't give them wisdom, because wisdom, I'm understanding, is much more of an embodied experience. There's an intuition to wisdom. There's a knowing of like, you know what, going down that route. There's, you can tell someone, I did that and this is how it happened. It doesn't guarantee that that's going to be the same thing for them. But there's also, I think, a lived experience that is more based on intuition. Like, you know what, there's something about this that I know is not going to be good for you. And I can't tell you why, but I just know. And I think that's very much because you've experienced and been around and done stuff that allows you to have that level of insight, for me anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's
going back to,
go on.
I was just going to say quickly, your thing about your kids being protected from bad things or bad experiences at work, for example. I think there's something there about being around people and just knowing how people work, and how do you get exposed to as many different scenarios where you can see people in different life stages, or people in different challenging situations, and how that gives you wisdom, because then you can know how to react because you've been there and you've experienced some challenges rather than everything's been rosy. I think that's maybe where it comes from. I'm reading this book at the moment called Transitions. Life is in Transitions. I don't know if you read that.
No.
He talks in that about life quakes, which I quite like. The idea.
Oh, I do like that.
It's a good one. So he talks about like challenging situations, and then every now and again, and he studied like hundreds and thousands of people through their life story and what's been challenging for them. And he's found that, people will have typically 4 or 5 life quakes, i.e., it's quite big life challenging situations through their life. And the kind of ripple effects of that, like an earthquake, there's the aftershock. It goes on for a while. It's not just an immediate thing that happens, but how that actually helps people grow and become stronger. So yeah, anyway, just that idea of not avoiding discomfort.
Yeah. And actually, when it happens, I guess one thing to be prepared for that is knowing that not being okay is okay. That actually out the other side, I think that's something that resources me now when stuff's not going how I'd like it to. People leave, people die, people get diagnoses, businesses fail, whatever it is the no, and maybe that comes from, I guess, having experienced things and still being okay. But also, actually, if we can impart that to our younger ones, that look, bad stuff's going to happen, and it will, it shapes us and changes us, but it's not a bad thing. I think we have as humans, we're like, dying is bad, and people leaving is bad, and divorce is bad, and this is bad, and it's like, it's not bad. It might not be pleasant, but it's not something that we shouldn't go through. And there's something about like the way we are now. I mean, this might just be me, but I come from my grandmother's parents were farmers, and I'm fascinated by farming and gardening. And I had 2 home births, and there's a messiness to all of that isn't shared on Instagram with the younger generation. And there's something about, like, even in a supermarket, meat is packaged in plastic and sliced up so you don't have to touch it, and we don't have to deal with like the messy, dark upset of life. And you can have a funeral, you can choose not funeral now, so you can even pick to not have a funeral, which to me is the most heartbreaking thing for the people left behind, because the funeral's not for the person that died, it's for the grieving, and no one wants to go to a funeral, and it's a necessary rite of passage. And there's something now about making everything squeaky clean, and the messy side of life is tidied away, which when I gave birth on the bedroom carpet, it was not easily cleaned away, even though we had lots of protective mats. And it's like, how do we communicate that and make that okay in this world where everything's not messy? And I there's something about Summercamp where you do that very well. Like, it's such a brilliantly orchestrated event, and it allows for, the kind of messiness and it's, I don't know.
Well, I think it's that feeling of, like you said, emotions are bad or good. grief is bad, happiness is good, happiness is all about happy feelings. I was chatting to Georgina, I believe is going to be on this podcast at some point. Georgina Jones, chatting to her yesterday.
This is where Sarah works magic with the podcast, and she may well be, but I don't know, because she just does all of her magic.
Oh wow!
Which is how the podcast has got to. I think we're on 30. This is like the 30th episode. I have zero credit for that. That is Sarah who organised you guys to be here. So yes, she might be.
Wow.
I don't know.
But I was chatting to her about this because she's launching her own podcast called Love Strategy, which she has come out of the program that she's on with, this journey she's on with us, which is a kind of emergent journey. It wasn't what she intended to create.
A bell now. Sarah sent me a link to her stuff.
Yeah, you might have met her at Summercamp. But the point being, she's been through some really awful grief lately in the last couple of years. And we were talking about this idea that grief and love are two sides of the same coin, and you can't have one without the other. And she's leading with love with the podcast, but a lot of it's going to be about grief. And actually, I think that's the message really is grief's not an easy sell, or negative feelings aren't an easy sell. But actually, if we don't lean into those, we're not going to get the opposite. So to sort of open ourselves up to the full remit of emotion, which I think Summercamp does well, is creates that space where it's okay to be laughing 1 minute and crying the next, or all of the things all at the same time.
Yeah. And actual, I mean, the last Summercamp was just with Saunderson and everything he dealt with. Like, boy, did he give people permission to grieve, to be able to stand there and do his thing and be dealing with, wife just passing away suddenly. That was like, you couldn't have made that up. You couldn't have created that without the tragedy. And that dance of like grief and laughter and the way he just that was magic. Really, really special.
I think that's a good example of kind of the messiness of life and how the business can sanitize the way we are to avoid difficulty or to stop grit getting into the machine. And so while it was also difficult for us, myself and Laurence, to think about how best to integrate Sanderson into Summercamp. It wasn't like an easy decision in a sense, because we knew what he was going through and we knew what it could mean not only for him but for other people. And so a very simple, easy business decision would have been to tell Sanderson, take a break this year. You need time to grieve. If we're going to be really cold-hearted about it, we need to keep a solid structure to this event and just make sure nothing goes wrong, because so many things can go wrong at Summercamp. We're talking about really difficult emotions. So there's not only the process stuff, there's just like people just finding it difficult. And at the same time, it was for an important thing to do for himself. It is what made him to do Summercamp. And so it wasn't just a business decision to bring him on because he was a great compere. It's also a decision based on this is something that is for him and a place to share. And there's a risk involved there that any business person would say, mitigate risk. But
it was a very brave choice for all of you to do that. We're talking, it was like a few months before for those listening who don't know what we're talking about, his wife had passed away a few months before he then compared 3 days of Summercamp, and he's known as funny, right? Funny.
And also she'd been to Summercamp. She was linked
as well.
There was a lot of links to the story.
Huge.
But it wasn't, and it's
such a brave.
It's his human experience. It's his experience of Summercamp. It wasn't a branding exercise. It wasn't us to try to tell a story of how Summercamp was such an amazing, vulnerable place. No, it's because Sanderson is a friend. People who come to Summercamp are friends. This isn't some kind of conference that we're trying to curate. And this is, I think, what I'm trying to link it to. There's this messiness aspect to what we do that a lot of people would really run away from. And it's because we want community. And I think there's this whole thing about this sanitized world we live in, which is quite individualistic, where we are in our little cubicles, our semi-detached or our flats, where things need to work according to us. as opposed to when we lived in villages and communities where people would just wander in and out of our houses, and we have relatives, and we'd have to deal with all sorts of chaos. It's a different experience. And so when you're talking about summer camp and the messiness of it, it's because we're all together. And there's no apart from you need to be at the talks in the morning, it is people just having whatever experience they're having in the moment, and you're exposed to the people rather than just, I don't know, a bunch of business individuals doing their thing, selling themselves.
And
there's also go on.
Go on, Laurence. No, go on.
I know, I was just going to say quickly, the essence of summer camp and even our work is all about, without saying cliched, how short life is. We want to do things that we care about. We want to do things that matter to us and to make a difference. And so this is the essence of summer camp. And so even Sanderson said it would be really weird if this year of all years, he didn't talk about death, because he's probably mentioned it every other summer camp over the last decade. He lost his mum at a young age. It's influenced his work, his own mission. And so there would be some, A, it's a cruel thing for it to happen to him of all people, but also B, it just won't leave him or us. And it's so integral. And if anything, yes, it was challenging, but it did give people permission, I think, to then lean into those emotions and also understand, look, if he can do this from what he's been through and take something from what Imogen gave him, then how can we sort of all learn from that, really, and get inspired by that?
There's something magic about, when I was a chef, and I'm sure this happens in most organizations, it's like, leave your effing life at the door and get on with your job. And he did the opposite of that and pulled it off is not the right term, but he did it as such an amazing example of how you don't have to leave your life at the door, and you can bring it in, and not only bring it in, but it adds so much to what he did and to what all like actually being with what's going on in our lives, in our business. It brings so much life and color. And yes, it's messy, but boy, was it refreshing as well. Like for me as a coach who, I'm dealing with life. I've got small kids, we're busy. I've got my husband taking me on a skip roller coaster, and then I've got to show up as coach. It was like such an amazing example of like how to do that, having come from 17 years of a chef being told to leave your effing life at the door, and I was kind of pretty good anyway at sort of saying where I was at, but this was like ninja level of really integrating that, really, and for you guys to hold that space, like so brave and courageous and so powerful.
Well, I think the biggest testament is that he felt comfortable doing it. He felt safe doing it. He felt supported doing it. And so, I know it's challenging for some people who arrive for the first time and, they get to summer camp and they're like, oh my God,
what?
Is this a joke? Particularly given the way he is. He's very so up there 1 minute and down there the next. You're not sure if it's a joke or what's actually going on. But because people are there for 3 days, we can hold them and make them feel supported through that. And then I think, like everyone, what can we learn from that? What can he teach us about going through hardship?
I think there's an element here of also us needing to trust the people who come. This isn't just us. Everyone who attends is holding space. And we have to trust that the people who come will be able to respond in the way that's needed at summer camp. And I have the feeling, we haven't had many issues in summer camp, thankfully. A few bits. But most of the time, most people who come, they get what it's about. And it's kind of self-filtering to a certain level. And so I think it's just for me, it's I was going to say, not a warning, but just for people who want to do this kind of stuff, it isn't easy. And you do have to really trust the people who come in order to work. Because as soon as you start getting anxious and start to control things, as my experience with this has been, that's when things can get bad. I think the wheels can fall off. And so there's an art to this. There's no playbook that you can just read off and do. There's you need to experience it, you need to be part of it, and then you'll know, okay, how do I hold this? And then holding is also feel like too much of a word, because you can't hold 150 people. It's impossible. But you can trust that you have the right people here to help you create the space. And Laurence and I lean on so many people at Summercamp to make it the space it is. And without them, and people like you who come open-hearted, who come with a real open mind as well, without people like yourself, Summercamp would be horrendous. If we had a whole load of sort of like grey-suited mood hoovers, as our friend Jack likes to call them, who are like all
grey-suited mood hoovers
and fearful of what bad emotions might feel like, and you know, like we'd be fucked.
It's funny when you say that. It reminds me of when I used to do networking when I first left kind of restaurants and Michelin star training and all of that stuff, and went out on my own. I moved back to Wales, and there just wasn't the level of restaurant working in Wales or in Cardiff that I was used to, and I didn't want to be a head chef in a hotel where it's just paperwork and rotas and health and safety. So I went out on my own, and I used to go networking, but I used to show up in an apron with a tray of brownies. And it's amazing how the suits kind of start to relax when, and I don't know whether you guys must have had some of this when you went networking. I don't know how long you did it for, but like breaking through the facade, because like I also believe that all humans are desperate for this in some way, shape, or form, and that the grey suit mood hoover, it's just a facade to survive. And the breaking through of that. I mean, I'm not suggesting you test this with Summercamp and bring 150 people who are like, no, I'm not doing this. So, like, that's not going to go well. And, you know, just to really acknowledge the people that are out there trying to hold it together. Like, it's just a facade to stay safe.
Well, it's also how those environments are designed, I think, is a huge part to it. It's like we perform because it's peacocking. It's like putting on the act. It's putting on the armor. But and also, I don't think humans are designed to stand around awkwardly with a cup of crap coffee and a business card. I don't think it's really what we evolved to do. But if you design it in a way that facilitates connection on a deeper level through brownies, clearly, that's a good start.
Yeah, that's how I did it. I was like, try this. It's really great.
It's a great icebreaker.
I don't think you can sell Summercamp. I think Summercamp sells itself in terms of you can't convince someone that you need to go in the field and just like open your heart. I believe you have to be
ready.
Wanting that. And it's I think it's tapping into this longing for belonging that most the people have, but they just haven't recognized. And then people get to a point in their lives and their careers where they say, actually, you know what, I need this. Yeah. Where is it? Where can I get it? And our job is just to make sure that people see where you can get it, rather than convince people who don't think they need it to get it.
Yeah.
And that's why people come, because other people tell them to come more than anything else.
I was going to say, if you have done this. Yeah, there's a few more coming your way if there's any space left this September. Don't stop talking about it. So I have a question about the name, because to share my journey of like how I got to Summercamp and how I found the name, because you sort of said about the name earlier. I thought, I want to revisit that. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know us and's going, what is this thing? I think I might be cracking. This sounds like what I need. I want to take care of those people. The bit that I got confused by, so I had Alan Wick on my podcast, or I was on his and then he was on mine. Then he said, come to Like-Hearted Leaders, which is anyone who wants to check that out, that's an amazing place on a Friday. Look up likeheartedleaders.com. Claire is coming on this podcast too. So I went to that Zoom meeting on a Friday morning, and then I came across you guys, and the name Happy Summer Startup School was bandied about, and I thought, that's not for me. I'm not a startup. And then Alan Wick said he was going to Summercamp. And I went, Alan Wick's going to Summercamp. He's not a startup. He builds and sold multi-million-pound businesses. I've had him on my podcast. He is not a startup. why is he going to summer camp? If he's going, I want to go. That's literally what happened. So I said to Alan, what is it? He went, you have to come. It's amazing. I was like, but I'm not a startup. And he went, it doesn't matter. Just come along. So I did. And here we are, you know, like 2 years on with, you know, a few, what do you call them? Human quakes? Several
Life
of those,
quakes.
which I think life quakes, several life quakes later, and 2 summer camps in my belt. So what do you say, like, who does come to summer camp? Because I basically, the last 2 summer camps I've been to, I've been having my own existential crisis. Georgina, if you're listening to this and we did talk, I'm really sorry. But I was like, bleh, for most of summer camp this year, in a good way, but I don't remember everyone I spoke to because of that. Who is summer camp for that isn't necessarily a startup? Because I'm not a startup, Alan's not a startup. I'm guessing there are people who are startups there. How does that work? What do you guys say about that? Like, what does someone need to be allowed to come to summer camp?
Well, one of the
If
first
they're
things
not
we say on the
happy or a
website is
startup.
it's not just for startups.
Cool. That's good.
Well, I think most people aren't happy. That's why they want to come. They're like, oh, I want some of that. That sounds good. The happy thing.
Yeah.
We have we do call it just summer camp now, whilst we are the happy startup school.
Okay.
Because I think it can confuse. But at the same time, I think we own the word startup or happy startup more these days. And for me, it's less about a stage of business. It's more, I believe we're all startups every day. You know, we're constantly evolving, constantly learning, constantly growing, especially those that run a business. So I think the key thing that ties us together is the values at the heart of what we're about, really. And that seems to be the hook more than necessarily a demographic. But I would say most people, when they first found us many years ago, would have been a startup. And as you've probably found, loads of people there have been many times and have evolved and come with us on this journey. And some of them are running businesses that have been around for 10 years. But then they're also probably thinking, what's next for me? So I think particularly, well, certainly during COVID, but even after, I think everyone's sort of evolving their work all the time. And I don't think you're ever done with this stuff. I don't think you're ever there. And so I think people going through transition seems to be I think the main sort of entry point for people, because I think if you're trying to do something difficult, whether it's starting a business, growing a business, closing a business, pivoting a career, wanting to level up, then you need people, you need community, you need mentors, you need teachers. And it's really scary doing it on your own. I think it's even not very fun either. So for me, there's something there about people trying to do something difficult and really needing support around it. And yes, most people are business owners, but I'd say more than anything, most people are solo business owners and really need to belong. And that's, I think, at the heart of summer camp.
Yes, it's funny the solopreneur lonely space. You know, it's one of the reasons I love Like-Hearted Leaders, because I was like, oh, there's a place for people like me to show up that is not my clients, or, you know, it's just, there's something magic about having a tribe. I really. Yeah,
and a lot of people, you know, there are a lot of people who are community builders like you, or who are coaches or consultants who basically do a lot of work where they support other people. And so summer camp really is a space where they can be supported and get a bit of distance from the day-to-day, I think, more than anything, like creating space, which is why I think, you know, all these emotions come up for people is, yes, there's emotional conversations and talks and workshops, but I think more than anything, it's just having that distance and a safe space away from the day-to-day, out in nature, where you can breathe and get fresh air and have good food. And that, I think, is almost what creates the magic, is that feeling of, I need more of this in my life. I need more space. You know,
it's the longest gap away from my children I've had in 5 years. I've started adding on a night on each end. It's like, oh, that space. It's you're right. It's that space without like someone needing me.
So I think there's an element there of, whilst there's a lot of challenging things come up for people, it's an experience, and it's a transformation experience, and it's a fun experience. And I think that's what I've always liked, is go away, have an amazing weekend, and also learn more about yourself than you probably would in 10 years of therapy. And make more friends than you'll ever meet in the next 10 years otherwise. And people call it a friend factory for that reason. You know, it's accelerates those things whilst also slowing down. So it's like a complete sort of contradiction.
I think
How do you go on?
I was just going to say, just based on how your experience of finding summer camp, it's not something you can capture easily in words. It is someone will tell you need to go, or you've been and you want to go back. Most of the time, there's a lot of people. Was it 50% come back most of the time each year? And it is. I think that's the easiest way to answer the question of who comes to summer camp. It's someone who's already been, or someone who's told to come. The majority. And then what is it about that?
Or someone who's or someone who's always wanted to come.
Yeah.
There's so many people that get emails like, I was meant to come 5 years ago and it didn't happen. I was meant to come then. It's always been on my bucket list. So there's an element of anticipation.
Yeah.
But it's that sense of there's an experience. I think there's the experience, and then that real sense of wanting to be somewhere where you feel part of something. And that's the ephemeral bit of this. I think that is that basic human need to feel like I'm part of something.
I think one thing that we don't talk about much because it's seen as a fluffy word is inspiration. It's kind of we think of it as like Instagram quotes and memes, but Leanna Fricker did a great talk. You might remember a couple of years ago about the
such
power
a
of
girl crush
inspiration.
on her. Yeah, that was that talk is still with me now. Plastic in the hedgerows.
Yeah, she's amazing. But I think she really did hammer home how important it is to have inspiration in our lives to actually go do stuff. So seeing what others are doing, not putting them on a pedestal, but just being amazed by them and then going, actually, they were sat in their audience 2 years ago. They're on stage now telling me about their story. And that's what we love, is this idea of anyone can be on stage. Everyone's got a story to tell. So that for me, just being around, this term I heard recently, collective effervescence, being around other people and their ideas and how that rubs off on you, even without doing anything, you've got that supercharged fuel to go again or start again, or start for the first time if it's your new first time around doing this.
Where do you guys go to get what I get from summer camp? Do you have a place? Because you do this for all of us, right? So you've got summer camp, you've got altitude. I'm coming on altitude. I wish I could come this year. And and you've got your Vision 2020. Oh, look, you've even got the branded shirt.
Always selling.
Where have you guys got a version of this that you go to? Because when you organize it, just from my experience, when I organize my client summits twice a year, like they're magical for me as well. I get far more than I think I'm going to get, even though I'm organizing it for clients. So I don't know whether you experience that you think you're doing it for everyone else and then magic happens back to you. And it's still not the same when you're like checking everything's okay and, holding the space. What do you guys do? Or have you not?
Well, I think it's something that's more. Well, do you know what I think we did when we started? I remember going to do lectures. We were inspired by that probably a decade ago. We used to go to loads of events, smaller events, I think, around the UK. But part of the reason we created our own events was because we didn't really see them existing. So in some ways, we had to create it, and now there's a lot more similar offerings around there, and I think it's both of us want to do more of that in the next year or two. But I would say altitude doesn't feel like work. I mean, in summer camp we love, but it's really hard to you can't get around to everyone, and also there's a lot of things that can go wrong. It's a bit like organizing a wedding where everyone's paying. There's going to be something that's going to go wrong. It's how you react to it that affects your experience of it. So whereas with altitude it's much smaller. And so I think the retreats we've been to India a few times, in the States doing this. And for me, we can be a lot more present in those trips and have a lot of time for ourselves to hang out and to learn from others. Like you said, that sort of inspiration you get.
I feel like we whether it's because of busyness or just finding the right events, we haven't in the past. Like Laurence said, the only other event we've been to is do lectures, which was like, or there's the Good Business, but you were invited to go and talk.
Oh, Good Fest in Cornwall, yeah.
Good Fest, that's it. But yeah, we haven't gone to other events necessarily. It's something I want to do more of. I go to LHL because I don't have to hold the space. I go now. I do icebreakers, which is this. It's once every Sunday we go cold water dipping because I don't have to hold the space. I can just turn up and be and spend my time. I went to the Do Lectures microblogging thing, not because I was going to learn anything, but because I just wanted to be somewhere where I wasn't holding the space and I could spend my time. And the thing I've learned actually is, I now seeing it on the other side, I realize that I'm not necessarily buying a course or learning, just buying time for myself. But to be in a space where I might meet some friends, or I might learn something, but I'm not clinging on to that. I think I'm in the place now. I'm looking for places where it is an experience that I'm not running.
It's a big difference.
I think one of the biggest challenges has just been travel, time, which is one of the things we butt up against, particularly with retreats, as I'm sure you find, is people with families, people with commitments, work, businesses. So it's a very real challenge. And also when you do create that time, it's just the most rare, joyful thing. But I think given we're away for a couple of weeks for Altitude, given we got summer camp, we're probably like away for a week there was 1 or 2 years where we were like away for 4 or 5, maybe even 6 weeks. Costa Rica, India, Brazil, USA, and summer camp and Altitude, and that was just nuts. So with hindsight, that was like going too far to let's just go and do lots of things. Actually, Echo was a friend's event. You probably met Christine Rain at summer camp. Her and her ex-partner Seb used to run this thing called Echo in Costa Rica, which was basically like summer camp but in the jungle. Summer camp on steroids. Amazing venue, amazing place, amazing people. And so we got invited to speak there, and so that was probably the last time 6-7 years ago maybe where we got to really not just go to someone's event but have a great little holiday as well, and just go somewhere we'd never normally go. So,
I think a big challenge for me now is I got pretty high benchmark for what kind of event I want to go to. And so, like you, I probably need a referral somewhere, and I'd need to know a lot about that place and actually know people who are going there to make me really want to do something.
Or just lower your expectations and not be the kind of, I'd have done that differently, and got your little checklist of things that you would have liked to fix. TripAdvisor review in the offing.
The thing is, but this is speaking to the lack of, I don't have the time to lower my expectations. That's a challenge. And now I'm looking at it from someone who wants to come to summer camp. It's like, I don't want to risk going to an event that is not going to be great. Why do that for me? I've got other things that I could do with my time that's much more nourishing. But if I want to go to a place and I want it to be good. I want it to feel good. I'm not going to go to a shitty festival where they've got crap bands and no toilets.
With actual
hippies. Go somewhere there. Actual hippies.
With real ones.
I want to have
proper ones.
Growthful experiences now. I don't want to just go somewhere. And so, and so I'm looking at it from that end now. So if I was going to sell summer camp, it's like, you will get that summer camp. I'm looking for something like that elsewhere where I'm not running it.
Yeah.
Well, the beauty about our community is there's so many people who are starting so many amazing initiatives, and more are creating retreats. There's a lady in one of my groups, Pelin, who's starting a retreat in Turkey, and it's an easy sell. She's look at the pictures, look at where it is. She's amazing. There's so many little communities that are starting, and they're learning from us, they're learning from other people who are doing this already. So I think that might be where I'm drawn to, is like having a connection to someone's story of why they're doing this thing, and also wanting to support them in it, because we know how hard it is to get these things off the ground. And those first few events are so important in terms of the success of something and the feedback you get from those.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's completely opposite to a McDonald's franchise where you just cookie cutter it out, right, and go around the world. It's like, actually, the things that make all of these events that we're talking about, the things that make them special are the humans and the messiness and the different location and the fact that it's not the same. And it's just the opposite, isn't it, to a McDonald's franchise? And it's wonderful to see so many things that are popping up, because I think people are sick of everything starting to look the same. You know, I go to another town, the shops are the same, the layout's the same, the industrial units have been built the same, and it's almost like, it feels like the pendulum swinging the other way, that people are going, this doesn't work. And so there's all these sort of the reaction to that of people popping up and doing things. And
I don't know if you've ever played that game
scale.
called GeoGuessr. Have you heard of that?
No.
So it's like I played it with my son. So it's basically like a online game where you get dropped into a city. So it's like a Google map, but with like the 3D view, street view.
Okay.
And you have to guess where you are. So you get a certain amount of time. But the thing is, if you get dropped into a city, often it's really hard to tell where you are, because they all just look the same. Starbucks
on every corner.
Big brands.
McDonald's.
Yeah. So you have to look at like street signs, or you have to look at cars, registration plates, and things like that. So that's a good example, I think, of any town in the UK, any city in Europe, often is so homogenized. And people have often said to us, "Oh, we should take summer camp and roll it out," or "We'd love to do summer camp in Australia. We'd love to do summer camp over in the States. Let's partner on it." And it's, well, energetically like, I don't want to do another one, but also you can't just take it and
cookie cutter it.
No.
Yeah, people have got to do their own version.
Actually, it reminded me, there's a guy, a great speaker, Eiji, a Japanese speaker, and he came to summer camp and ended up creating basically summer camp in Japan, but off his own bat.
Amazing.
Called it something like Life Camp, and it was the same thing, but just for his community.
It was his,
so the ripple effects of it for us, that gives me more joy than having to organize it with him, or to try and scale something that's, I don't think, scalable. And that's the beauty of something like that, is it's not scalable, and that's what makes it special, I think.
Special.
Well, this for me talks to a deeper question of, why do you want to scale? What is it in you that is driving you to try and make this happen everywhere? And this thing that everyone needs. You know, where's that coming from? What is that saying about yourself? That it has to be a certain way, and it has to be in this place, and this is how it's going to work. McDonald's works because, they were there to try and dominate the market. Also, they were a great real estate company, as I understand. That's their business model. But there's a, for me, like, there's something about McDonald's. The value of McDonald's is because it's the same. That's why everyone loves it or wants to go, because they know, if I go there, and talking to Laurence's lowering expectations, I know what the cheeseburger is going to be like. I'm not high.
Wherever I am,
whatever country I am, I more or less know what that cheeseburger is going to be like. And that's what people are buying. I think when it comes to experiences and things like summer camp, and even the do lectures, our friend Seb, he started off trying to do lectures in Costa Rica. It is about the people, when it's something, I think, more experiential and creative, basically human, then it is about who's holding the space. It is about who's driving it. And also when it's something so complex, it isn't just like, you can't just, like with summer camp, as we experienced in Costa Rica, sleeping in the bell tent in that humidity and heat is not a pleasant experience.
With howler monkeys all around you.
With howler monkeys. As much as it sounds like, oh, that's amazing, like, that's fucking awful.
Earplugs would have been helpful.
There's something about knowing what it's like in the environment, having the tacit knowledge of being in a place, and then developing it based on your own knowledge, rather than just boom, boom, boom. This is what it is.
Yeah. Well, it's literally, from a farming perspective, it's dealing with biodiversity versus like clear the land and plant one crop, and like that doesn't last. Like a few years later, everyone's going, "Fuck, where's the soil?" You can't. It's the same with this, right? You've got to deal with, well, what's the weather like? What's the climate like? What's the population like? What's wildlife like? What are the people like? It's actually working with it rather than against it. It's huge.
And also, just the local context as well. I think you can't assume something's going to work somewhere different. And so that's why I think if we do events overseas, it's working with partners who know the lay of the land and know what's needed and can spin it, or share the story that's going to work. We'd never have gone to India if someone hadn't come to Altitude and said, "You should do this in India." We're like, "What? That won't work." But we found a way to make it work, because he somehow knew how there was a bridge to his world.
Yeah.
But it was it takes that link for me, and that's, I think, all of our initiatives have sort of been led to us from the people we've met rather than carefully orchestrated.
What do you say to people who are listening to this who don't know what they need and don't know what's enough, who are coming out of some form of crisis, who know that what they had isn't what they want, but they're just like, what the fuck do I do now? Do you ever deal with that, or do people that come to you kind of sort of already know where they're going? And just as a human, what would you say to that? Because it's their big questions, right?
Easy
What's
question.
What do you want?
I know.
Well, we got 3 hours and we're only an hour and a half in, so I'm like, I can do this question. We're not wrapping up in 2 minutes. Because there's a lot of people out there that are like, I know my life doesn't work. I'm looking at my job, my house, my situation. I know it sucks. I don't know how to figure out where to go. I can't, Gary Vaynerchuk talks about reverse engineering. You can only reverse engineer if you know where you want to get to. What do you guys say to that, to those people?
So I'd say we work with a mix of people who have an idea of where they want to go. There's a mix of people who know that they want to get out of a situation, work situation typically, or a business situation. So there's more of a push rather than a pull. And also those in a bit of a liminal space of, I'm a bit stuck. Maybe they got made redundant, or maybe fell out with a business partner, or maybe they got divorced, or, there's a bit of a life quake going on for them. So the future's not clear. I think I've learned that if you wait to get full clarity in the vision, then you probably won't start, because I don't think you can ever get full clarity in the vision. We can help with that. You can do things to get clear on the vision, but I think often it can either feel too big for people, so it's too scary, not knowing where to start. There's a fear of success, fear of failure that kicks in. And also I think they can not know how to kind of transition towards that, because they're too sort of stuck in this right at the moment. So I think one thing is just talking about it, I think, first and foremost, to people, and particularly finding people like you. So whether it's accountability buddies, a community, other people who are going through transition or going through a difficult time. I think without that, I think you'll find it hard, which is why mums groups exist. It's why AA exists. It's why Weight Watchers exists. Like, people going through similar challenges is a great way to help. I think the other thing I've learned is just trust in, there's a great Do Lectures talk, trust in the things you love. Just trust in yourself, trust in the next step, trust in this feeling that something needs to change, and follow those breadcrumbs rather than thinking you need to know the end goal. Because I think it is a serendipitous journey out, from my experience. We worked with 150 odd people on our program over the last 4 years, quite intimately. And I think the thing I've learned more than anything is the thing you thought you wanted to do won't always be the thing that you end up doing. And so there's a serendipitous aspect to this that only happens when you start to trust and commit to walking this path. And someone described it really well. It is the unpaved road, and you're literally building the next step as you go. And doing it with others is way more rewarding, and I think actually effective than doing it on your own.
When you said that, it was really obvious, but I'd never thought about it in those terms of, like AA, Weight Watchers, mums groups, all of that. We kind of almost naturally do it. But I've never thought, if I'm dealing with something, to actually just go and find other people that are dealing with that, per se. Like if it was, and I've sat in Coda and Al-Anon, and I've been in said groups in those points, but I've never thought about it of like, oh, okay, so like a change, or a divorce or whatever, like when there's something that there's maybe not necessarily an obvious group to actually almost create that, or find that, find someone who's already started it. It's really useful. Buddy groups.
There's I think what I understood the question to be was kind of, what is enough and what do I want? I think it's like, how do I find the answers to those questions? And the context being, I'm going through a life quake, and I'm not sure what I wanted is what I wanted, and I don't know how hard I need to work towards to get it. What is enough effort? What is enough work? What is enough striving towards something? And so, where do you find those answers? And then we talk about it through the lens of starting a new business. That's because it's the safe thing to hold on to. It's like, okay, I need to make money. I need to do something with my life. It needs to actually be of value, And we identify ourselves so much with work these days that thinking about that as a structure to work with is helpful. And that's why I think Weight Watchers works and Alcoholics Anonymous work. They have a structure. It's like when someone is in chaos, give me an answer. Don't tell me to go deeper, because I'm fucking deep
already fucking drowning.
I'm drowning in the fucking pit. Give me an answer. Yeah. And so, having an exercise, a tool, a structure, something, just not because it will definitely change, it will give you the answer straight away. It just gives you something to hold on to, a life raft. If you are like, what do I do next? What do I do next? And for me, part of that as well is like, give yourself a break. Yeah. Be kind to yourself. Be okay. It's shit. It's fine. And I think that's, I would say, the biggest challenge for people who are in that chaos is they're adding on to the chaos with the judgment of being in chaos. Oh, what an idiot. Oh, I did it. And in that space, you're never going to find an answer because you're too busy beating yourself up. And so that for me is by being in community or by being with other people who are in a similar space. Firstly, so I'm not the only idiot. There's everyone else here dealing with it. And secondly, actually, there's something that I know that has helped that person. And suddenly, okay, I'm not that bad. Yeah, I'm not that confused.
Well, it's a classic thing, isn't it? Find someone else to help if you're really struggling yourself.
But also not in the way of like, by helping them, I'm going to be a better person. Because that's the danger. It's like, suddenly I'm on this train of like, to heal the world. I need to heal the world, but to heal myself. That's dangerous.
No.
Because what we're talking about here is actually, what is it I really want? What does actually success mean to me? And that's quite an interesting, that's a deep dive. That can be a really deep dive. But before you do that, you want to get to a place where you're feeling a bit more, all right, I kind of get the gist. And so having some simple tools just to help you answer those questions are like, okay, how much money is enough money? All right, how do I come up with that figure? What does that mean to me? How do I actually want to spend my time? I've been doing it all of this way. It's like, what is it in a perfect world? Again, trying to giving yourself a break, not trying to say, I'm going to find the perfect answer. It's like, what does it feel like to spend my time in a great way? What does it mean to be with people who are the people I want to be? How do I want to be with them? And what does it mean to do something in the world that makes a difference? And what does that mean to me? Is it a big thing? Is it a small thing? Is it like talking to someone in front of me? Is it like writing I don't know. What does that feel like? And just having a simple process to just identify those things, which we did in Summercamp, just a little breadcrumbs. And then, all right, from there, okay, to answer that question, well, maybe I need to ask another question. But rather than just go deep into what does it all mean, I think that just kills you. So to be playful, to be a bit forgiving, and also to let go of any kind of judgment as to what's good and what's bad. Because in that space, and this, maybe Laurence talking about the trust, it's like, you don't know right now.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think not being comfortable with not knowing, but sitting with the not knowing, I think is really hard to do. But I think also not rushing into seeking answers or seeking a new identity or role or solutions. Because I think it's one thing we see a lot is people, they are shifting their story. It could be a new business they're starting. It could be a new career that they're starting, a new role for them. new life path, and so we seek certainty, I think. And so if someone says, what are you doing now, or what's going on for you, they'll want that quick, snappy answer. And so it's really difficult. We've worked with people who've sold companies, and so you've won the lottery, and then what do you do next? Like when someone says, what do you do, what are you doing, are you retired, are you out of work, and so a lot of people, they want the next story to tell, and so they might have the money, but they haven't got the purpose and they haven't got the story. And so the easiest thing to do is just go into another role, help another company, or become a non-exec for someone else, or to do a course. Whereas actually, like Carlos said, creating space and just going, I don't know. That's a brave thing. And to do that with others, saying, I don't know, and you don't know, but together we can start to work it out. And maybe I'll help you, and then you help me, and then we'll help each other. And that the liminal space is more and more, I think, where more people find themselves, but we're all scared to say it, because saying I don't know is actually a courageous
really
act.
scary. Yeah, it's reminding me of when I got financially free, and everyone's like, that's amazing, and I was like, I'm having a fucking identity crisis, quarter life shakedown, don't know who the fuck I am, people are asking me who I am, and I'm like, I don't think I could even say I don't know. But leaving catering, like people say, what do you do? I'm a chef. Like, okay, everyone's fine now. Leaving that behind, like giving up that identity, but without a new one other than like financially free. And then everyone just goes, oh, you've got money, so you'll be fine. Like everything's cool. Like this metric of if your finances are okay, you must be okay. I was like, no, I'm divorced. My brother died in an accident. I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. Everyone I know is working. Like absolute chaos. Oh, and no one cares because I've got money, so I should be all right. Like this, it's such a weird space to be in. Like, and actually talking about this now, I'm like, oh, maybe at that point that would have been a good idea to find other people going through the same thing. And that, like, I almost had too much space. What's interesting is this dance, right? That actually that the finance created enormous space, which after working 80 hours a week was like, fuck, what do I do? Like literally, what do I do? I'm no longer a chef, and I've got all this time, and I've never had all this time, and I don't know what to do. Really scary. Really scary.
Well, kind of for me,
looking back.
Yeah, well, this is what I was curious about. There's the question, what do I do? And I think that's a perfectly valid question, because we want to lead meaningful lives.
Yeah.
But there's that other thing of like, what do you do as a way to, to be in the world, as opposed to who are you? And when you started talking about divorced, brother passed away, financially free, it's like, where am I now? Who is me now, as opposed to what do I do? It's like, this is my life, this is my experience, this is where I've got to. That for me is a lot of the time more of an interesting question. It's like,
who are you?
Tell us a story, right? Because I think, because I don't know how to explain what I do. Well, I can, but it just sounds a bit boring. And I'm much more curious about when you start talking about, this is what's happened to me in my life. Oh, wow. What was that like? How did that feel? How did you cope? What does that, what has that made you? How does it make you look at life now? And that sense of curiosity about people that engenders. And then for me, then that becomes like, it's not about what do I do now. It's like, what experiences can I have in life? There's a blog post I read about being psychologically rich, and as opposed to being just financially rich. And psychologically rich is like what Laurence was talking about, having the whole gamut of emotions, which is also because you've had the whole gamut of experiences, because you've lived life. And I think we're attracted to people who have lived lives, as opposed to, and that's why so many people love car crash TV and sort of like Big Brother style things. Like, I want to see the drama of someone else's life. But actually, what you want to see is you want to connect to someone, because you want to feel that experience of, wow, that emotion of life.
It's made me think, though, I think a good question to ask is like, what do you value? Like, what's important to you? you know, if you're stuck in that rut. And we talk about needs, you know, what are your core needs at the moment? You know, what needs are being met and what needs aren't being met, and where's there a mismatch? And I think when you start to ask those questions, then you get a better response, I think, in terms of I value connection, I value creativity, I value adventure.
This is an interesting question for me. It's like the difference between values and needs. Is there a difference? Or are they the same thing?
They're different for me.
For me, I'd say the value underpins what shows up as a need. Like a lot of people work with me that they want to value money, but they just don't. So actually getting financially free is really fucking hard. If you don't have a high value for money or a high value for, mine's actually a high value for financial freedom. It's not, I don't have a high value for money. My husband has a high value for money, and it shows in like what he does. And it shows up how I do money. So then there's a need that gets fulfilled that comes out of that value. For me, like how I would look at it in a way. So they're interconnected, and I'd say they're inseparable.
Because I think this comes down to the questions around what do I want, what do I do, how do I feel, and it's something around, because like security is a need. Is it a value as well?
I would think. Oh,
I
well,
see what you say, and then you could go.
Values is more like consistent. I think of values that don't change as much over time, whereas I think needs can evolve through our life and different stages of life.
You don't think values can change?
I think they can change, but I don't think fundamentally.
You can change them with you can change them with fairly I would say, life crisis or a cancer diagnosis or someone dying. But it takes a lot to change your core values from all this like work I've done and the stuff I've read and the experience I've had.
But does it take a lot to change your core needs as well then?
I don't.
I'm curious because this is a question I've had conversations I've had quite a lot in terms of what's the difference between values and needs.
Well, do you know what your core values are, Carlos? But the way to look at it is probably a content thing, right? So you go, well, what are my core values? So I'll give you an example, right? My top two core values are financial freedom and family, right? And it plays out. Like once I've really discovered those, and actually I'd even go so far as financial freedom, there's an underpinning value of that, which I'm kind of discovering, which is mission actually and purpose rather than financial freedom. The financial freedom could have arguably been a need that came out of like really having a high value on purpose on a massive scale. And the needs have changed around those things somewhat, but only in content, not in context. So like having a high value on family means I need them around, and I want connection with family. Like I won't move to America, for example. Like I was reading on Spotify about a different way to get paid for podcasts on Spotify if you're in the US. And I was like, oh man, that sucks. I'm never moving to the US. All my family live around here. Like it's just a no-go. But then, you know, as time changes and family changes, that, you know, it'll shift in content, but the context is still the same. The values are still the same underneath, I would say. But, you know, what I need as a mum in terms of family is going to change as the kids grow up. But it's still family that's massively important.
See, I would say a core need for me is learning. Yeah. I always need to be learning. If I'm not learning, it feels, and that's a need, that's present, always present. You know, I've discovered that if I'm not learning, I get bored. If I get bored, then I start to feel a bit miserable. Play again. And for me, play in the sense of just being able to just not to do without a sense of purpose. Yeah. To have, and then it's connected for a need for freedom. And these needs for me, that they were baked in from early childhood. Yeah. They have a root in something that I experienced early in my life. And they are, and they create a sense of me. I also, what I value is I value openness, and I value humility. Someone who's like humble and who can just talk in a way that has no airs. I value compassion. Someone who can really see, and probably, that's the instance where I need compassion as well. But it's not like a core need. But when for me, sometimes values is something I want to aspire to as well. Something, a kind of a way I want to live towards. I want to move towards my values, and sometimes I can be away from them. But I can't get rid of my needs. My needs are always there, and they kind of like.
I think what I'm hearing when you say that is I'm hearing a hierarchy of values and then aspirational values, even when you're talking about needs. When I do a values exercise, I think it's chapter 2, it's pretty early on in the book with people, quite often they'll say something and I'll say that's not a value, that's an aspirational value. And the easiest example is someone who says my top value is health and they're really unhealthy. It's like, it's an aspirational value. You don't value health, because if you did, how I know I value financial freedom is because I did it by 32. Like, it's just it's a non-negotiable, and it came at the expense of pretty much everything else, actually, except family, although the two were really conflicting, at the time. And also, I think when we discover what the top ones are, I think that's the thing, is to put them in an order. There's a coach that I work with, Marilyn, and she did a values elicitation. I think comes from NLP work. And you basically challenge the values against each other and see which ones come out on top. And those are ones that win the day. Like for me, when my brother died, I still got the deals over the line that were helping me get financially free, even when I could barely get out of bed. I'm talking like in the weeks after he died, I could barely function. But if a solicitor call that involved a deal, I could pull myself together enough to get that done. And then I'd be like, I have nothing left for the rest of the day. And it's like those values played out. Other values that were lesser, on the hierarchy, they just didn't play out so much. So it's like understanding and seeing, like, people's values they happen. That's how we make choices. And when we're going against them, that's also, like you're saying, you're kind of moving away from them. It feels off. It feels wrong. Like we're doing something that's against one of our highest values. That's not going to go well. That's going to feel
so. I'm hearing
shitty.
They're the same thing. It's just you're just trying to grade them as to how close, how much they guide your actions day to day.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? So financial freedom for you is a top value because it guides basically your decisions on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I discovered them, it made my life make sense, because I had a lot of conflict as to, like, if you can imagine, a family member's just died and yet then I can suddenly be on the phone to a solicitor getting a deal done. That really messed me up, because I was like, how am I doing this when nothing else matters? And I only kind of discovered a lot of values work after that. And then I looked back. So a lot of people, when they do this work with me, they suddenly experience their life making sense, because they realize why they made a decision. Because actually uncovering that, like, absolute core value, all of a sudden, whatever it was that happened that was a bit like, why did I do that? Or why was I like that? Suddenly goes, oh, that makes sense. It doesn't make the experience any sort of, it doesn't change the experience, but it changed the perception of the experience. It changed it for me. Like, I was suddenly okay with grieving for my brother and being heartbroken and getting a deal done. It made it okay, versus I was thinking, am I some cold-hearted, awful human that like gets the deal done? It was like my idea of the worst nightmare of, like, the thing I didn't want to become. A bit like we were talking earlier in the podcast about being ruthless in business. I was like, God, am I like something I don't want to be and don't think I am? And then I was like, oh no, it makes sense now. Like, it's important. It matters to me.
Why would you say that that's such a core value then? Is there something below that? Is there something more? Is that made of something else?
I would say I think there's two things. So there's a very interesting conversation about genetics that I'm having at the moment with Kevin, who I mentioned earlier, and actually in parenting, that there's a school of thought called parenting doesn't matter as much as we think it does, and it's genetics and peer group, which we're all parents on this conversation. That's quite confronting to consider, that maybe we don't matter as much as we'd like to think we do. So based on that conversation, it's maybe start to look at how much of what I do is childhood trauma, right? What happened to me, and how much is genetic. It's really interesting you asking that question. So what I would have said in the past is my parents and lost their business. We moved from Switzerland over to the UK so that me and my brother could have UK schooling, because we were in Africa, then Switzerland. And I think the next choice of moving to somewhere was like not great, like the Congo, or, you know, like somewhere where you don't really want to bring up kids per se, but you might earn a lot of money. It was that kind of choice, or come to the UK. So we came to the UK. And my dad set up his own business and lost everything in the 90s. So I was 10 when his business went through, and we ended up in Wales because he got a job here literally like the day before the letter arrived saying your house will have to go type thing. You know, it's like lost everything. And so we've gone from international lifestyle, you know, loads of money, everything's fine, to like, what do you mean we can't afford anything and we're buying clothes in charity shops type stuff. So I would have in the past, and I still think that's true. I still think the drive came from that. It's like, I'm not going through that shit again. Even though at the time I didn't cognitively understand what had happened. You know, I think kids understand a lot more than we can't cognitively process it, but the visceral feelings of that. So in the past, I would have just answered that that's the driver for me, of just this like absolute, I am not going to feel like that ever again. And now this conversation about how much of what we do is genetic, I kind of look back at my past, and in my grandmother's side, my maternal grandmother's side of the family, her grandfather went to London, made a load of money out of property, was very entrepreneurial, came back, bought a farm. They had livestock farm. My grandma grew up on a farm. She became a farm vet. And I'm like, oh, hang on. So is it what happened? Or is it genetic? Or is it both? And I think once we start to look, if we've got the benefit of knowing like what our genetic history is, like we don't know, I don't think you can do a genetic test and figure out, which part of the genetics is going to play out in my life. But there's kind of a level to which now I'm going, oh, is it not as much what happens to me as I think? Is there other stuff at play here? You know, and who knows? Like that's all anecdotal, right? But it's
what I understand. There's like memes and there's genes. I think this is Richard Dawkins' work. There's the DNA encoded stuff, and then there's essentially behaviors passed on through generations. So attitudes, ways of being that's encoded not necessarily just in the brain, but just, again, like you said, a bodily thing. So I can imagine, you know, if you had an entrepreneurial heritage, that could be passed on. And it's like, okay, something maybe is not as clear cut. Well, your father had it, things didn't go well, but doesn't necessarily mean it was there. So you have it. There is something about being self-reliant, being autonomous, having agency, having power in your world. That, you know, those are the things that I think about when I think about someone who wants to be financially free. There's a real, not in a bad way, but there's a kind of a control aspect to it.
A massive, huge control, 100%. Yeah.
And so I can hear from your story, there's a combination of like, there was a time in my life when I was out of control and it felt shit. And I come from a lineage of people who can take control of their lives. And so there's a mix there for me, but all of them, again, this is me spitballing now and just looking at it from this lens of I call needs, is like need for security that overrides my need for connection, a need for freedom that overrides my need for stability, a need for recognition that overrides my need to hide, you know, whatever it is. It's like these things that then we can capture as words of financial freedom or, you know, fame or whatever it is that we value. So that's why I was curious about this exploration of how these things could tie in. Maybe it's just me just deconstructing too much because I'm a physicist, but I kind of sometimes feel that these kind of pivot points, these levers, that when we identify them, they kind of help us make sense of as to why the rest of the machine works the way it does. So anyway, that's why I was curious about values, needs, how does that work? Because when we're talking about what does my life mean, it's like, what is the language that we can use that helps us answer those questions in some way that everyone uses, so we can have a conversation about it.
The other piece that's you've just reminded me in saying that is that Tony Robbins talks about 6 or 7 human needs. This is where I have not got them to hand, but there's certainty, uncertainty, love. I think love and connection are 1, contribution, significance, and I'm missing 1. Someone listening to this will go, it's this, but he talks about it in terms of 6, and everyone's got their top. So he is distinguishing between needs and values in that conversation. And you could ask, you could answer, is certainty a value as well? I don't know. That's where it gets a bit different, because for me, so I know that my top 2 needs, so this is actually useful. My top 2 needs are certainty and love, and I know that certainty is above love, right? So I will take certainty over love. Like it ain't gonna happen the other way around. And the paradox in that is that people go, you like certainty, like your life has been chaos. I'm like, yeah, but I created the chaos. Everyone else around me was left uncertain. I was completely certain because I was the one that went, sod this, I'm off to my next job or moving or leaving a relationship or whatever. So yeah, I think that's just the other piece to add in, that in those terms, I think it's really different.
For me, this illustrates this really well, because when you're able to tell that story and you own it, that gives you a sense of direction. That gives you criteria to use to make decisions really confidently. I think it's that lack of awareness of those things. That's when people drift or get confused or overwhelmed. I don't know which way to go because I haven't owned whether people agree with you or not, that's the right hierarchy. That's mine. Sure. I own that. And then the ones that are certainty, uncertainty, and variety, significance, connection or love, growth and contribution. Seem like growth. The basic, like the salt and pepper of the human meal. And like those are the things that you need. And then that becomes like a useful framework. Like, okay, how do these things play out in my life? So I can work out what is enough and what is it I want.
And how do I use it as a compass to make decisions? More importantly, I think it's like any of these things are useless unless we can use them as a guide.
And they're going to play out so differently, right? So you go, oh gosh, how can we only have 6 human needs and yet we're all so different? It's like my need for certainty. Well, I'll create certainty by creating uncertainty in others, which is it's not great. It's not a great way to do it. And I there's a whole conversation called as well that I do it differently now. I don't create certainty for myself in the way that I used to. Like the way I used to do it was very ineffective. Like it was not nice for the people around me. It wasn't a very successful way to be. It left a lot of devastation in my wake, all of that, which is interesting now when I experience someone doing that to me. I'm like, oh gosh, I used to do that. That's nasty. But it's like there are people with a high need for certainty who are they're not entrepreneurial, they're savers, they won't take risk, they don't want to move. It's like the complete opposite of what I would do. Both got a high need for certainty, but how it would play out is very individual. So it's for sure, it's that old thing, know thyself, and then
this is yeah. I think this is where it lends it to this whole conversation where I think we're going. It's like by having this awareness, like we start off like, certainty, uncertainty, like where does that certainty come from? And this like process of self-inquiry, if you choose to follow that path, it just gives you more awareness as to why you're building this business, doing this work, being with these people. And then it becomes a choice. It's like, I know that exists. I know where it comes from. It comes from that time in the past or that experience. And I can choose to either follow it or not. As opposed to, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do it without really knowing why is that there. And that, for me is part of this, like, how much is enough? What do I want? It's like, we will make decisions based on, we'll rationalize it afterwards, but in the moment, it's probably an emotive thing. And I feel there is benefit by understanding where is that feeling coming from. And that's why I talk about needs, because I think I've stolen it from nonviolent communication, feelings, needs, needs, feelings, actions.
Hearing you both talk's making me think that you can't know someone's needs, but you can know their values.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I think there's that line, when you think about a brand isn't what they say, it's what they do. So a brand builds your trust through their actions, not through their words. And so their values are their actions. The values are what they do, not what they say their values are. As the old line we used to say, live them, don't laminate them. So
brilliant.
I think when I think of any of us, the way we show up, the things that are important to us, the way we live our values, people can see, because we do it. We don't say it. But I don't think you can know fully what people's needs are at any one time. You can sort of guess at them, but you can not know them, because I think they evolve more than needs. I think that's what I'm coming to, is like, for example, with Summercamp, like humility is both, I think, one of our values, and also Summercamp is an example of that. We're not the ones banging the drum. We're not Tony Robbins.
You guys live and breathe that. Like, as soon as you said that, I was like, yep, 100%. Like, you're so unassuming and kind of in the background. And
and so for me, being down to earth, being approachable, not treating anyone any different, not putting speakers on a pedestal, this idea of a shoulder to shoulder event in community, that runs through it. Whereas our individual needs can evolve, and they can also, I think, be something that's in our head and it's not quite there yet. So we're trying to strive for that. Whereas I think over the long term, I would say our core values are things that don't change that much, because I think it's just who we are. It's just how we show up. It's what we do, how we do what we do.
I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think there are core needs that don't necessarily shift, and there are core values that don't necessarily shift. And then there are values that shift, and there are needs that shift as we go through life. And I think we can get, the way I would look at this, we're always changing. Like, life throws shit at us, and we change how we, what we need, where we are. Our actions change because of our circumstances. And my belief is, my own experience, and sort of looking into this, there's stuff that's baked into our bodies. It's the stuff that's just like, you can't, like you say, maybe it's the DNA, but there's something that's like, without, even with the deep work, you can't shift. You just will react in a certain way, because you've just lived that so deeply in your life at some point. And that, for me, I would articulate it as a need. I would articulate it as something that creates a feeling that's connected to an experience that made me feel unsafe, or one of these core needs for not being met, or something like that. And that guides my day to day, whether that's in a relationship, or whether there's a business decision, or whether that's a choice to do something new or different. And I'm saying this because it helps me provide a framework. When we're talking about what's the steady ship I can use here to like hold on to while I'm trying to work out. Because in the end, I think enlightenment is none of this matters. I'm not values. I'm not needs. I'm not what I do. I just be. And I float through life like a fucking Buddha. But most of us don't get to that stage. And so I think we use these words to just help us make sense of where we are now, where we want to get to next.
Yeah, and if I look, I go, well, I have a high need for certainty, and I value financial freedom. So the two are like it's a done deal. Like, it's gonna happen, because it's just, But how I get certainty now is very different to how I used to get certainty before. It's
wisdom.
Wildly transformed. Yeah, wisdom, right? It's like, creating uncertainty in others so I can have certainty is not so great.
Last week we spoke to Sam Conniff, who's the founder of the Uncertainty Experts. So maybe you're the certainty expert. You can have your polar opposite business to challenge his. Certainty is way more fun. Come join me. Join my course.
And guess what? All the people who've got a high need for certainty, and the others will be like, whoa, get away from me.
Yeah,
it's so fascinating. And I think what I love is that we're having this conversation, and for anyone listening who's going, I don't know where I am or what I'm doing, it's like, we kind of do, and we're still like is it this? Is it that?
Surely
What
those
is it?
guys
It's
should
like
have worked
actually
out
being
by now.
open. Huh?
Yeah.
Like be open that none of us have got the answers, and we're all figuring it out. And it's such an individual journey, Although actually collectively we kind of go through the same things, but just in.
Well, I think that's why it's important to be humble with this work,
Yeah.
because we can't have the answers. I can't have your answers. You don't have my answers. Laurence is likewise. We can have experiences. We can have wisdom based on those experiences. We can share our stories. And I think that helps. For me, it really helps just hearing other people's stories. That's why I'm so curious, and I love hearing just how people experience life, because it informs my own life so much. But to hold on too tightly to a guru or a course or a program that tells you will get there if you just do A, B, and C. I don't believe in that. We offer stuff like that, but not because we guarantee it, because we think these are the tools and the skills that will help you work it out yourself.
And like you said, that's an important point. I think just the word advice is always loaded. I think just give advice, like you said, like what would you do? What advice would you give to someone who's going through a transition or difficulty? I think, like Carla said, what we found is having a group of people where they can each share their lived experience, how they've navigated that, is so much more powerful than any
advice.
One who claims to have the answer. Who's like, this worked for me, so it would definitely work for you. Follow these steps. But maybe through those stories, you can find the steps that work for almost everyone.
One approach that I really love, and we call it wise crowd. And an aspect of that wise crowd bit, which I employ a lot, which I think is quite connecting, and sometimes, and a lot of the time, not only connecting, but just it shows a new path when someone's in a challenge. So the whole idea is a wise crowd is you have a question, a challenge, something you want advice on, or you want to help to unlock. And we do have space where people just spitball and get creative about ways to do that. But before that, there's this bit where I like to do is like thinking of a metaphor, a color, a sound, or a feeling that just captures what you just heard. So you hear someone say, "Oh, this is where I'm at. This is what's the challenge. This is what's getting in my way," and all the stuff. And then you just, I'm thinking of a bird trapped in a cage, and it's like the sun is burning and it needs to get out, and that's and that's what's coming to me. It just taps into something different, and I think being able to tap into not just the thoughts and the ideas, but the feelings and the pictures helps us access something different in ourselves as well. And so there is that element of just don't tell me what to do. So what's coming up? When I talk about this, what's coming up?
I think the second part to that, which I think is even more powerful, is having that person turn away, or if they're on Zoom, switch their camera off, and then listen to people share their thoughts and where they're at. So they're not sort of giving advice; they're just saying, "From what I've heard, this," or this could be a thing that could work for them. So having them not sat here going, "You should do this," eye to eye, but actually just listening to other people talk about you when you're not in the room is a really powerful sort of tool we found.
Yeah, I like that. I do, a mastermind, which I thought was going to be a similar thing, but it's not. It's that's a brilliant way of starting to describe something and kind of being able to have a collective conversation that isn't fixing or advising on a situation. It's huge.
It's based on liberating structures, if anyone wants to look that up or put it in the show notes, maybe.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to write that down. It's the longer I coach for, the less I say. Like the more years that go on, the more I realise I don't know, and the less I say to people. Like I really noticed that when I first started, I'd kind of be like, "Well, I did this. You should try that," type thing. And then like, the longer it goes on, I'm like, I don't know. Let's have a look. And it is that really experiencing that we just have, like, we can have ideas of what we think someone should do, but really no one knows except ourselves.
Actually, like what Carla said, this whole having these steps, or having, like with our case, we've got a curriculum, we've got a journey we take people on, but then realizing that then helps some people that doesn't work for, butt up against it and find their own way of doing it that maybe works better for them. But without that, they wouldn't have found that path.
I think a big part of this, whether it's to do with going a journey on the program or having a group mastermind work, and I'm connecting it back to humility, is feeling receptive, feeling connected to whatever someone's going to tell you. And, you know, even if you've got an amazing course, if you're not receptive to it, you're not going to do anything about it. Even if you've got the best guru in the world, if you're not receptive to them, you know, the most experienced, if you're not receptive to them because you don't feel heard, you don't feel seen, you're not even in that space to be open, then it's worthless. And I think this is, you know, when you're talking about you're saying less, I think by saying less, we just give space for us to just be together. And I think that if there's something that I would really love to see more of, is less, I need to fix this problem. And more, how are we feeling right now? Where are we at? What's going on for you? You know, what's coming up in terms of the energy that you're hearing, or that, rather than straight away trying to fix a problem, getting people connected, feeling connected, then we build trust, then we build openness, then we build vulnerability, and then we get to the real problem. Not the, oh my God, this sales call really went badly. It's the, I really find the idea of selling myself fucking hard. And it's bringing up all sorts of fear in me. And I'm beating myself up about it. And I don't think I'll ever be able to do it. And I really don't think I should do this entrepreneurial thing anymore. And I'm just going to stop. That's the problem. Not give me a sales script because I need to have to sell my thing.
Give me a strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the hard thing about that wise crowds process, I think, for people, is the first part is don't dive into advice, just ask a question, you know, ask a clarifying question. And almost everyone goes, yeah, I've got a question. And then within a second, it goes into telling them what to do. And you're like, sorry to be ruthless, but can we just
have you thought about?
Yeah,
the classic question.
Yeah,
just putting a question mark on the end of it doesn't make it a question.
There's something interesting in that as well that comes up for me, and also when I've coached people, therapists especially, actually, rather than coaching. There's a slight distinction, I think, for me and therapists who are, you know, they've got a specific modality that they do rather than coaching, and it kind of go in here, there, and everywhere. And this idea that they have to do something, it's like we've gone full circle, right? It's like we have to do something to be of value. Surely just sitting there and being quiet, people are going to feel ripped off because we didn't do anything or say anything or give them our wisdom. And it's that completely counterintuitive of people have their own answers. They need the space and the thinking to bring it up, or like a question, you know, a poignant question, or describing it in a different way. And it almost feels like, I can't make money just doing that. You know, there's that for like the coaches and the therapists and the people helpers listening to this, and actually really acknowledging that of, oh, maybe actually that's what people need. Maybe that's okay. Versus you need it, like the number of clients I've had that like, I need to go and get another qualification. I'm like, do you? Why? Are you already holding space? Is it working? You know, and I'm all for upskilling. I'm not saying like qualifications are bad. But it's that interesting thing that drives us to give advice and to do stuff and to be doing versus being.
It reminds me of someone was, I'm going to butcher this example, but would you pay just a random person 10 grand to get on the phone every day to say, have you done it? Have you done it? Have you done it? But you actually do it, maybe launch that business, bring in those sales, as opposed to pay 500 quid on a course that you never use and it never does any change. Yeah, it's like while this person is just calling you up, not even telling you anything, but they actually get you to do something, as opposed to you learn all of these things and you don't do a thing. Like what ends up becoming more valuable to you if the change doesn't happen? And so there is there's an extreme version of this thing of like, it isn't about you. It's about the person actually making a difference in their life, actually doing the thing they want to do. And if all it takes is for you to sit there and listen to them for an hour and to give them space and maybe ask one question that makes a shift, and that shift actually makes them end up doing the thing they really wanted to do, is that valuable or not?
Well, and also
As
the other thing
opposed
is,
to
where else in their life does someone just sit there and listen to them without trying to say something? Like most people are terrible listeners, like terrible. And so most people.
I was going to say, from the perspective of the customer, the person who's receiving that thing, is like, I just want to make the change, and I'll give anyone the money who will help me make the change. And they then pour it into a book or a course or just learning because they think that's going to make the change. But no, it doesn't make the change because they're not doing anything about it. What they want is someone to help them do the thing they need to do, as opposed to accumulate stuff. That
I'm just imagining someone going, "Have you done it? No. Have you done it? No. Have you done it? No."
Yeah.
Don't ask why,
Exactly.
but I still haven't done it. And then they pay 10 grand to say no every week.
Yeah, and that's it in the end. But the thing is, like, you wouldn't invest if you didn't believe you could do it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't. So no one would give you money because that much money if they didn't believe that there's a possibility of doing it. So we can put ourselves in the way by saying, "Oh, I can't accept that money because there's too much money." Well, you're projecting onto this person your beliefs about what's possible or not.
Is this your next course? I just phone you up once a week.
I love it. This is the whole thing.
This is a sales pitch.
Perfect. It's a great sales pitch.
Being paid to be you. It's like,
and it's phone. There's no WhatsApp. There's no Zoom. It's just a phone call.
That's it.
It's just one phone call.
But I'll only work with you if you believe you're going to do it.
Do you get more irate as the weeks go on if they say no?
No, that's where this is where the training comes in. You get so zen, you don't care. You're unattached to their outcome. It's them that has to be attached to their outcome.
Brilliant. I love it. The paradox for those who aren't coaches listening. This is the shit we got to figure out, people. When we're helping people, we're like, how much is too much? Can I accept that amount of money for doing that? Surely I have to add more value.
Yeah.
And then this moves me on to thinking about Charlie. I'm going to say your Charlie, who I met at Summercamp, who then came and did some clarity stuff at the summit, who's coming on the podcast. And we had this hilarious WhatsApp exchange where I was like, I need a bio. And he was like, here's the bio. And I was like, I need something that will capture people. And he was like, no, not put me in a box. And then, it was just like this conversation that he's so makes everything so simple, but
annoying.
It's he's fucking. I was going mad. I was like, just give me some things. I need some things that keeps it short. And he's like, no, I can't do that. Why don't you tell them this? And then he did write. He reflected back to me something that I had said to him about how profound it was working with him. And I was like, great, it's done. But it was so not the thing that I wanted. And it's this dance of what he does is so simple and yet infuriatingly complex and mind warping. Just the people you guys find is unreal. That's how do you find people? Has this been a serendipitous journey for you guys? Because I'm kind of well, I find people because you found them, and then I'm like, you're great, come and play over here with us. But how do you guys find them? Case as well. How have you got an economics lecturer from Amsterdam in summer camp? Blowing people's minds. How do you find people, and how do you choose?
Well, in those cases, pardon the pun. We don't find people. We just bump into them, I think. I would say. It's like when people say, I'm sure you get this, when we ask someone, how do you know about us, or how did you find it? Oh, I don't actually know. I just stumbled upon you somewhere, probably in some internet rabbit hole, or someone mentioned you somewhere, or 5 people mentioned you, and eventually I thought, okay, I've got you, look them up.
I need to follow this. The universe is knocking loudly.
So Charlie, we met through a sort of friend conference in Brighton. I got chatting in the pub one night. I just thought, you're a bit different. You're not the sort of person you meet after a conference. We had this 2-3 hour chat, and Case I think when we very first started the Happy Startup School, was one of the people I found online, and he had a blog about being something about being the Buddhist businessman, and he talked about the new model for entrepreneurship. There was a well-being. What was it called? I don't remember now. The new economic kind of forum or something. I can't remember, but it was to do with basically Happy Startup in a different sort of wrapping.
He was saying the same.
So we connected on that
same message.
Yeah, and so I would say we just collected. We're like collect amazing people, and I think I was talking to someone on a late show this morning actually about this. That our name, whilst as you pointed out, can be challenging. I think the balance is always that we've met amazing people, and I think the name really does help. It has become a gift for us because people all around the world, whatever country we're in, it just seems to connect with them. Either they get it and it's not for them, or they get it and they're curious. So yeah, that's definitely been a good sort of magnet for us, I would say.
I think a big aspect for me, a way to interpret this is also really just clarity on the needs. You know, what do we need from this journey of Happy Startup School? Why are we doing it? What is it we're interested in? What is it that we're curious about? And you know, that whole question, what do I want, is like, you know, when you find out, I really want to know more about this. You know, this is really something that I really want to learn more about. I think, these new filters come in front of your face, and you say, "Oh, there's a person over there. There's a person over there. That person knows this person because they know what I want," kind of thing. So there's something around not so much manifesting, but just
clarity on knowing what you want.
Clarity of knowing what you want, and then just being more visible about that as well. You know, being seen as that kind of person who's interested in those things because you're talking to those people.
And again, back to the values thing, I think just through content, that's really helped us as well. Through blogging, through doing our podcast, through obviously the events as well. We just naturally bump into people coming on our program. You know, 40 people a year. We get 40 new amazing people, amazing stories. Each one of them could stand up on stage and give a talk. So I think there's something about the vibes we put out, that kind of internet cliche that your vibe attracts your tribe. I think there's definitely truth in that. And so it could be something on LinkedIn as well, you know, more and more. It's like through conversation, someone tags you, you guys should connect, and before you know it, you're on that little rabbit hole, and then you forgot how you first found each other. So it's a slow organic process, I would say, and we can never have the richness of Summercamp now if we have started out now. It's, you know, it's got that solid foundation of friendship and trust, and then through that, you know, put it this way, if we were struggling to fill up Summercamp, we should say, Charlie, who would you love to see at Summercamp next year? And we get an email of 100 people. Or you ask Floris, what workshop would you love to give next year? And he's got 100 workshops he can give. So yeah, we've got a hive of amazing networks if we want to go in any direction.
And where's Summercamp going, and where is Carlos and Laurence going, and what do you guys want and need? So what does your futures hold? Do you know? How much do you know?
That's a nice simple question to answer. Summercamp's not going anywhere.
As you can tell, I like simple questions, small, simple, meaningless questions. My favorite way to roll. That's why I have a 10-minute podcast.
Well, where do we want to start with that? There's the events, there's us as a business, there's us individuals.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You both turned 50 last year. Sorry, because we're February now. Like that's a big. There's a whole milestone there to, you know, what's next. What's, you know, it could be a milestone, could be not. It might be completely meaningless to you. But I've noticed, you know, each decade, like I actually love getting older. I've never had this thing of like, oh my god, I'm going to turn 30. Oh my god, I'm going to turn 40. Like I love it. And I've noticed that each decade's kind of brought this new, different sort of thing in.
You can't wait to get older because you're just waiting to just have that snowboarding accident.
140. Boom. But here's the thing, right? Knowing I want to die at 140 in a snowboarding accident, like that makes life exciting. I'm only 43. It's like it changes everything, doesn't it? So that's a very good example of like when we know what we want and where we're going, that like feeds into my every day of moving and eating and yoga and all the rest of it.
Mm.
So what's you guys? Yeah, what does the future hold? What do you know about what you'd like and what you want and what you need? And is it different now than it was 10 years ago?
Well, I would say, yeah, I think for me, it is turning 50 is a milestone. It does feel different, maybe more so than 40. 40 was like, it's a thing, isn't it? For some reason, hitting 40 feels like it's not got a great rap, is it? Turning 40. And then you get to 41, and you're like, oh, this isn't great. I hadn't thought about the bit after 40. I'd planned for 40, but not 41 or 42 or 43. So for me, I think I've always been a fan of like simplifying things as much as possible, because I think it's really easy to make things complex. And so part of turning 50 for me is actually, how can things feel easier? How can things feel more fun, more joyful, more creative? And so it's, again, tied to needs, really. Like, how can we make this energetically sustainable for us over time? And just to go with that energy rather than think what's good for the business, or we should scale Summercamp to 20 countries. Like, what do we need as individuals from this? And how can we tap into all the things we talked about: time, money, relationships, and impact? What are the things we need from those 4 things? So for me, back in the day, I would love to have grown the Happy Startup School to every country, have a chapter here and there and everywhere. And we tried that and it didn't really work. And I think it was a bit of ego talking too. Like, this is great. This is a gift. I want to share this with the world. And we want to sort of be the leaders of this movement. So now I'd still love to sort of reach a lot of people, but I wouldn't want it to be in that same, or with that same energy and with the same stress and overheads and that kind of hustle to grow sort of ethos. So for me, it's partly not planning too far ahead that it takes the energy away, because every time we try to plan too much, I just lose a bit of energy. Following the work, because I think the work's deepening and rolling and evolving, which is really, I think, keeping me entertained, and I think us entertained in terms of where our real sweet spot is. And knowing that there's great adventures ahead and great people ahead, and that serendipitous path has got us this far. So whilst we can plan for the future, I think leaving space for that play and space for adventure is important for me. And like you said, branching out to other people's communities, other people's events and worlds is something that's exciting me more now, because we've got a bit more space than we would have done a few years ago, and our kids are getting a bit older, which I think helps as well. So that's my take on it.
Cool. Carlos?
So the words that are coming up for me are depth, mastery, practice, space, creativity. And then in terms of what's alive in my world, parents are getting older, kids are getting older. That in the language of needs, there's my needs and there's the needs of the people around me. So there's I'm actually thinking more about the future these days. Not so much business planning, but kind of just life planning, not in a rigid way, but just an awareness. There are, when you have elderly parents, you start thinking about, all right, what is my role in their growing old? How do I want to? And then also with kids, how do I want to be with my kids? How do I want to? My wife and her career, and what does that mean? So there's a level of awareness around that then inputs into what it means to do. What's the business about? And to a certain extent, what we do now, I would be more than happy to do it for the next 20, 30 years. It's like Summercamp when I'm 80. Why not? Some level of group coaching when I'm 80. Why not? Going to the Alps when I'm 80. Why not? There's no reason why I'd want to change that. What I would value is meeting different people, learning something more about other people's experiences, or collecting friends, as we like to say. But more than anything, I think what's coming up for me is then sharing. How do I share this with more people? What does that mean? And where's that coming from? And I think it's coming from the need to create and the need for impact. But it's also thinking there's a playful aspect to this as well, where it isn't about I'm going to change the world. It's just more like what interesting, fun thing that I could do that I could give to other people that would be fun and interesting for them. And then how can I do that while still paying off the mortgage and putting food on the table and going to other people's events and yeah. I don't know, there's something also around what Laurence is saying around simplicity, and this is about what's enough. What is it? I would like a new phone at some point. It's dying. I might change my laptop next year because I find it really helpful because it meets my need for freedom. I can work from anywhere. I love the idea of freedom. I also love the idea of having a place. I'm not quite there yet. I have this need for like a wall where I can map out, somewhere like an artist's studio where I don't have to pack stuff up all the time. I like the idea of that space. I also love the idea of that space being next to other people's spaces who are in our community. It nearly sounds like a commune, but I have this this is like you step out of your studio into a space where there's other people that you can have a chat with, that you can connect with, like summer camp every day. That coffee moment at summer camp every day, and then you go back to your studio and do your stuff. That feels energizing. I don't know what it looks like, Havis, but that's a feeling that I like to have. But it all lends itself to depth, mastery, practice, creativity.
Yeah, big. Summer camp commune. I could get enrolled in that. It's almost it's one of the
deal with the property.
If only we knew someone. I think about stuff like that a lot. Around that, I have a lot of friends who are just spread so far. The upside of being able to move a lot and the internet is we can have connections all over the place. The downside is I'm like, all of my friends live, an hour, 2 hours away. So yeah, that want to be connected, on a closer basis is huge. The internet gives us this like sense that it's kind of possible, but it's not real. That's a big deal.
I think you just need to rent a wall, Carlos, a big wall that we can just go to once a week with our tribe.
But there's something around, actually, when you're talking about friends being spread out, which I miss. And I actually, I was going to say regret, but there's something quite important for me about what you miss when you see someone day to day. There's something about that day to day interaction with people where you just really intertwined in their lives, that whole...
Your kids grow up together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the day-to-day mundane that's so special.
You can walk into your kitchen, nick some milk, and go, that's fine. There's no problem, There's that real feeling of like a connected life. And I think there's something there for me I miss by living in away from my parents, away from even Laurence, but he's like on the other side of Brighton, and we got mates. One's in Scotland, one's in London. There is something about that I feel the need to create that kind of real, more intertwined, interlaced, interweaved life.
Sounding like a commune.
It is sounding like a commune. It's definitely sounding like a commune. It gets
a great documentary.
Though. It would be a brilliant documentary. Imagine
midlife
that.
Commune.
Midlife commune. Yeah, it gets interesting though when you start to go. We've had this conversation as a family because all of Owen's family are here, but we've got my mum's sister, my auntie, and my cousins are up in Staffordshire, and we seriously talked about them moving down here. But then you get this. But then there's the next layer of family. So my cousin's husband's family is up there too, and then it's like everybody has to move, but where does it end? And it's just it's an unanswered one for me of how to do that, because there's always then the next layer. oh, but if they move, then they'll be further away from those people. Interesting. Maybe it's a retirement commune.
It's ripe for innovation.
that whole sector is ripe for innovation.
Yeah.
On a mass
By the time
scale.
we get there, there'll be like Fatboy Slim playing, you know, on the Saturday night, doing a tea dance.
If it could feel like summer camp, a retirement commune that felt like summer camp, I wouldn't mind that. I could live there.
Well, we've heard the term Zimmer camp before. I think that works quite well in this instance.
Zimmer camp. I love it. Yeah. Well, there's many things to create then. Many things to create.
Effortlessly, hopefully.
I feel, do you know what the interesting thing about effortless that I think is important to kind of say is that effortless isn't effortless? Is that a thing? You know, it's like the overnight success took 2 decades to create. It's kind of, I feel like effortless is like that. The effortless gets easier with more experience, wisdom, time, knowledge. And it's not, and look, there's a whole way of, yes, you can have effortless as a way of being. Sure, there's going to be the odd outlier who are like, hasn't got the money to pay their bills, is in chaos and can somehow create effortlessness even in chaos. You know, there's always going to be an outlier, but there's something about how effortlessness is not necessarily that effortlessness.
It's not a lack of effort. I think it's, well, for my relationship to it is it's more of a consistently moving towards the things that we value. And I think when we do that, like you might end up working the same, maybe even more, but it doesn't feel like effort. It doesn't feel effortful. And so your feeling of energy or space or time is totally shifted because of just that alignment, I find. So I think there's something about simplicity and how can you make it as easy as possible, i.e. the least amount of effort. But I think in terms of just impact and how we build our businesses, I think getting that alignment's key. Because sometimes, and we work with a lot of people who maybe have 2 worlds, you know, they're 1 foot in a corporate world or 1 foot in the startup world. And often we found when they've got that contrast, the time they spend with their day job over time drains them more and more and more. So it's not the hours, it's not the effort, it's actually the incongruence with it, you know, the misalignment with it that causes
that's
the
exhausting.
feeling of effort.
Yes.
So it takes so much effort to do that thing versus this feels like play. This feels like a holiday compared to that. So I think that's an important distinction for me.
The way I'm seeing it in my head, there's always a flow of energy. Yeah, energy moving, whatever's you're doing. So, and the effortlessness is a feeling, and it's the difference between rolling a boulder uphill or letting it roll downhill. Yeah, and if you're pushing something uphill, you know that's tiring.
It's hard work.
But energy being used. There's still energy being used, and similarly, just roll a boulder downhill is you're just running next to it. Energy is still going, but you're not.
Yeah, I love that.
You're not doing it. You're just following it. You're just running with the boulder. You know, you're just going downhill. So, for me, that effortlessness is about whether you call it a flow, the path of least resistance. And maybe it isn't even manifesting, but you're just open to ideas. You're like, oh, maybe I'll bump into someone who has several hundred acres of land, who wanted to build something, just didn't have the idea, knows how to build stuff. It just needs someone to give them the vision. And say, cool. All right, I'll do the vision bit. You do the building bit. Done. Effortless.
Yeah. Love it.
And I think final point on that for me is back to the belonging and connection piece. You know, when something feels effortless in terms of a relationship, you know, us working with people in our community, how that can feel effortless, and that isn't an exchange, it isn't a contract, it's just a chemistry, and how easy it makes things, whether you want to like get Charlie in your podcast or start a business with someone or get Alan as a mentor, it just feels easy because of that link. And that for me is what I strive for. Is like, if it starts to feel really hard to work with someone, then it's like, we're not a good fit, and that's fine, but let's not try and force it.
Yeah.
I have a very live example of effortlessness for me. There's a guy that I've been following for years called Jerry Colonna, and he runs a business called Reboot. He wrote a book called Reboot. It's all about radical self-inquiry. He was in financier. He works with massive CEOs. He runs a business that I'm quite jealous of, and I'd always wanted him to be in the podcast. 2 days ago, he liked a post. I messaged him. I reached out to connect. Laurence was already connected to him. I reached out to connect. He accepted the connection. I asked him, would you come on the podcast? He said, yeah, no problem. It's like, I had built into my head that, it'll take time.
How hard it would be to get him.
Yeah. And it was like, bam, bam. And then he's got a book coming out. The stuff that he does aligns to what we do. So yeah, it was right timing. Maybe that's the thing. It was luck, serendipity, whatever it is. But for me, that just captures, like, I could have pushed hard, trying to find a way in, as opposed to it just happening. So for me, it's like, there's something around maybe patience, maybe clarity about what you really want, but ultimately it will take, you don't have to force it. You're waiting for it to come up when it needs to.
Yeah. We have been going for 2 hours and 41 minutes and 5 seconds, Carlos and Laurence. So I think it's probably, it's not actually, it's not far off. You're up there with the rock stars, but we generally do. There's a short record, which was Gareth Wynne-Jones, who was a similar effortless get on my podcast, who's the Welsh sheep farmer, who I think it was 45 minutes, because farming is just mental. And it was brilliant that he came on, because he's usually like on the BBC. So I was like, he's on my podcast. This is freaking cool. So yeah, I don't think it's quite, I don't know. That's an interesting one. I need a hall of fame for length of time.
Marathon.
I'm going to look that up now, see what's the longest one. Is it a record for you guys? Is this the longest time you've been on a podcast?
For me, yes.
How long did you say? 2 yeah, this is the longest for me.
Nice. All right, there we go.
That
So
made me wonder. It's got to be a world record for the world's longest podcast. If not, maybe it's something to aspire to.
Could be, couldn't it? Yeah. It's got, going over 3 hours, I think, is starting to get epic. But yeah, well, we have to start having loo breaks. So what would you like to end on? I love your underlining of people knowing what they want and what they need. I think what's been missed, for anyone who's still listening after this long, we salute you, thank you. And, we're privileged and honoured to have their time. And I'm also privileged and honoured to have your time. I always say this to people on my podcast. I'm like, everyone that comes on, I like crazy busy. So the fact that you guys gave me 3 hours of your busy lives, which is 6 hours collectively, is just amazing. And having that wisdom, like I said to Carlos before we came on, this podcast is a very selfish endeavor. I do it because I want to do it and have these conversations. If someone listens, it's a bonus. And I think that if anyone wants to listen more to you, what there is to say is you have your firesides weekly, and you do have some epic people on your podcast. I don't think we've talked about that. So I think it's important to mention that, because if someone's listened to us for this long, I'm going to say they want to listen to more of you. That's probably certain. Is there anything else that you'd like to invite people to, or would you like them to stalk you on any particular social media, or do you have a newsletter? All of that world, like, where can people hang out with you more and get your wisdom on an ongoing basis?
At the very least, sign up to the newsletter. I'd say go to thehappystartupschool.com, and then you'll be able to, you'll get alerted of the Friday firesides, and so you'll know when to come and watch us live. Watching us live is probably the best way to get to know us. You can listen to the podcast, but if you're there live, you can chat to us, and we can.
Yeah, because yours is very interactive, right? Because although we have like people commenting on you here, it's not. I don't tend to interact, whereas yours is very interactive. It's really fun, which literally does make it feel like a fireside.
Exactly. So that's one place. That's the lowest hanging fruit. I would say.
Mm.
Otherwise, we can connect to us on LinkedIn. So you got the name on the screen if you're watching this, but Laurence McCahill and Carlos Saba. I don't think there are many of those. I did find a happy startup school in Brazil, and the founder is called Carlos.
No way.
It's like
It's like another dimension.
It's like weird. It's like, what's going on there?
Brilliant.
So yeah, watch out for him.
Love that.
I think that might be a failed chapter that I talked about.
So that's weird. And then I think the one of the, as well as Summercamp that we talked about, if you look up Happy Startup Summercamp, if you want an experience.
Oh boy, you're gonna get that.
Might spot Alex in the video. Alex Louise in the video or the photos.
Definitely, just check that out. It's 3 days of your time, and it's a significant financial investment, but it's definitely something that, if you do it once, you'll be hooked. There is Alptitude, but that's further down the line, depending where you're at. That's 7 days. That is something that's, you will really get to know myself and Laurence. We'll spend a lot more time with you there. We'll go up a mountain, we'll come back down, and we'll have fun in a pool. But that's and you'll get to know some other people just like yourself really well. What's alive right now is we're running Tribe 9 of our Vision 2020 program, and this is talking to this whole idea of like, what do I want? What's enough? I've got here, wherever that here is, doing the work, efforting, as like I think Vix Anderton, someone in our community, say, efforted enough, and I want to do it differently, but I don't know what that is. So we will help you just find the compass points, the ways to make decisions as to where to spend your time and energy, and then what that means in terms of actually making stuff and selling stuff and promoting yourself. We'll put a business sheet sort of code on it, but a business wrapper on it, but the core of it is really about this Excite strategy. What's important to you? So that would be that's if you're at that space, go and look up vision.happystartups.co and you'll learn more about it.
Amazing. Lots of different ways to come play and hang out, and awesome. So if you are listening to this and you're either, I think that's the really key thing for me is that you can either be at startup stage, or you can be at, I'd say where I am going, I'm fully booked and I need to change, and the model's got to be different, and it's like next stage. It's a huge, it's kind of like being a startup. It's a very weird experience to go
transition point
for sure. Transition. Yeah.
That's it.
And we've had people come and do it again, a few times, because it's a practice ultimately. I think that you either wait till a big life quake for change to happen, or you try and preempt it. And I think that's what we try and help people with, is like,
most people do it because they can't do it on their own. They don't, they could, they just get too busy. And so we will provide the accountability and the structure to just think through the things that you really need to think through. And that's the real value of it.
So valuable.
You'll do it, and you'll do it with other people just like you, just like we were talking before. It's like, how do you navigate a transition? Not on your own.
Do it with
and
people.
You get Carlos on the phone every week, so that's the beauty of it.
So, that really, have you done it yet?
Have you done it yet? No. Have you done it yet?
What a brilliant add-in. You just need a gift. You just need a Carlos gift. You've done it.
That's next year's 10 grand program with
exactly
10 minutes work.
Boom.
You guys are literally working for ease here.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Walk the walk.
Carlos and Laurence, it has been an ultimate pleasure. I am
likewise
more than excited about September. It can't come soon enough. Also a little apprehensive. The stuff that comes out is epic. And just thank you again for your time and your attention. And those who are still listening, gold stars all round, and hope it got value. And you know where to find us all. There will be links here, there, and everywhere. Lots of love, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Awesome.
Adios.
It's been effortless.